Things you own end up owning you.
What's up, good people? Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for subscribing. I seriously appreciate it. My guests today probably don't need an introduction if you've been listening to the show. They are Roddy and Kyle Mamounis. Danny is an independent health researcher and coach, and Kyle has a PhD in nutritional sciences. In this episode, we bring the hammer down on the carnivore dilemma. We talk about Paul Saladino and his appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast and just some of the carnivore diet problems. Kyle and I also talk about Amber O'Hearn and her lipivore theory, and as usual, we go off into many subjects. I hope you enjoy and have fun listening to this one. Thanks. Okay, Danny Roddy, Kyle Mamounis, thank you guys for coming on. First of all, I want to say, Danny, this was your idea to get the three of us together. Thank you very much, sir.
If this is a total disaster, it's actually completely my fault.
Well, we're going to have a great fucking time, though, going down. All right. So, big week for the carnivores, all right? Paul Saladino was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I want to talk about that with you guys. But even before that, he was on a podcast with a couple of guys from Black Rifle Coffee. Do you guys know that little coffee brand? Mm-hmm. And they had a chat, and there was a bit where Joe Rogan was telling them about his experience with being carnivore for about a month or two, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said that one thing that really stood out to me, he said he got really angry. He said little things would piss him off, and he would just say like, "Oh, fuck that guy," or whatever, you know. And I just thought that's interesting. And since you guys were both carnivores there for a while, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think he said the same thing on the Paul Saladino one. He said he got real aggressive, and yes. it was very quick that he said it. But I took note of that. I actually kind of watched the first 45 minutes and was so bored that I kind of like skipped through the rest. And so I hopefully I don't regret saying this later, but I kind of feel like victory because like Paul is so closely aligned with kind of what Ray has been saying for many years, you know. I kind of feel like the fun is gone in the critique. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't look at everything like a us versus them or whatever, but it's thinking about that whole scene has become considerably less interesting, I feel like. Kyle, what do you think?
I just watched the first slightly less than half, so maybe an hour and 20 minutes or so, and I took some notes. And yeah, Joe did say that, which was interesting. And yeah, it was crappy. It was like one of the first notes that I took was Saladino seems kind of weird.
That's a fucking Kyle Mamounis note right there. I love it.
like he does like, and
he's trying really hard. He's trying really hard.
He smiles a lot.
Yeah, too much.
I think he's trying to be like, he's marketing. He's a marketing person. So immediately unimpressive. Hasn't Joe gone over this stuff before? Basic carnivore stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like the whole thing, they're like, oh, did you know? Like, guys, hey, it's 2020. Have you ever heard this? You can eat just like meat and fat and water. That's like, Jordan Peterson's daughter has been saying for like 5 years.
That was the thing. I went to go in kind of maybe hearing the sugar PUFA stuff. And I mean, you watched the whole thing, but I didn't really get that. They mentioned honey and things, but it was really basic, super basic, like the alphas eat the liver type of talk. And so that was again, you said it on the last time you were on with Leo. You said what he has been talking about is what you were thinking about 5 or 7 years ago, you know, and like that's just the truth, you know.
Yeah. So it came off to me as like a book selling, you know, just like, I mean, if you like the Joe Rogan, so I haven't liked Joe Rogan for a pretty long time now, but he sort of exposed himself in this new studio that looks like a fucking like transhuman experiment. Like, chamber of
looks like a little tampon, huh? Looks like they're inside of a tampon, like an alien tampon.
Like, they like brought the furnishings from like Epstein Island. Like it's like red. It's like a red pod.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
it's
a red pod. And his old digs were like totally cozy. I don't get, like, how is that an upgrade? Like, and the only thing I can think of is that this sounds better, but his shit sounded awesome. His like previous podcast, like he's got the best mics. He didn't have his old setup, they didn't have monitors in front of them, so there was it was just them talking into microphones on a desk. It sounded as good as the radio. It was great. It sounded better than anybody else in the podcast world.
I totally agree with you. The only thing that I can see that gets somebody in trouble is like when I did my book cover, I actually got an artist that was named Mario Hugo that does like Rihanna covers for. So when I paid him to do the book cover, he was like, "Here you go. Like I did it. This is it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, thanks." Like there was zero like like us back and forth. I told him like I wanted it to like represent like a flow of energy, and this is what he gave me. And so again, I'm not a Joe Rogan apologist. I think you're dead on, but maybe they got into some goofy artistic situation at the studio, and it turned out just like what's that goofy brand, Affliction? Like it looks like an extension.
Bro, Affliction is dope. I wear shit all the time, asshole. Come on. Anyway, his excuse was that they had about like 6 weeks or 8 weeks to get to the new studio, so it was a quick bounce out of LA because his shit just been going down here and it just hasn't stopped. What?
Because like Antifa's gonna like firebomb.
Well, he's been talking about it for a long time that it's gonna blow up in here.
He could just like MMA them.
With his
did you know that he does MMA?
I had no. What? Is he the guy from Fear Factor?
Eddie Bravo.
Eddie Bravo? Who's that guy? Okay.
Look into it.
I don't know.
Anyways, okay.
Epstein Island. So tell me about Paul. So what the fuck? For the people that don't know, what is going on with the people are getting so aggressive when they're on the carnivore diet? What do you think? Because I've had that same experience. I don't know, because I didn't really go full carnivore like Kyle style, like where I was chopping up raw chicken and all that shit. I kind of I had like the Vince Gironda diet. You guys know Vince Gironda, who he was like this famous bodybuilder back in the 50s, and he was like one of those first guys that actually popularized that sort of diets. But he would do it like you just eat meat, any sort of meat, organs, well, I guess that is a carnivore diet. But every 2 to 3 days, you would restore your glycogen stores. You'd have like a carb up meal or several meals. That's the way that I did it. And when I did, do that, I definitely felt like a fucking dick all the time. And I could not wait to have like, back then it was like sweet potatoes or ice cream or whatever the fuck that I had. I could not wait to have that meal. And then immediately I'd have that meal and I'd just be like, oh God, this is life, So it's kind of funny that people aren't connecting the dots yet, I don't know. Why aren't they connecting those dots yet, you think?
I bet they really do feel better considering whatever else they were doing previously. Like for example, I don't know, like our boy Paulie, like he has said multiple times, like I feel way better than I used to feel, and I don't think he's lying. You know what I mean? But like some of these health things are so nuanced, and so it's actually I really hate saying like, oh, it increased my libido or it increased my mood now, because that's so like subjective, and it's kind of just like in the eye of the beholder. But yeah, maybe his cortisol was super high before, and then on carnivore it's lower or something. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, Kyle. What the aggressiveness? Do you think that's correlated with the starvation hormones?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like the same, like I said before, how a low carb diet is like the same thing as starvation, except you're just eating. And like everybody knows about like getting hangry. And it's like, until there's a compelling alternate explanation, like that's just explains it to me. It's like if you the amount of like your brain is running on ketones and your body's aware of this, and it's just like not doing the thing where you're in a good mood, because it's like this is a bad situation.
But on a debate with Frank Tufano, though, he said it was outlandish what you just said. So I was listening to that to prepare for this talk.
I just recently found out about that guy. That guy is fucking psycho, isn't he? Huh?
Well, this actually is related to the Paul Saladino Joe Rogan thing, but
I had no idea.
This is too weird to get into. Actually, I'll restrain myself.
We can talk about it a little bit later. But one thing that you were saying that people are getting hangry. But here's the thing. So here's what's happening with the carnivore thing. It used to be okay. I feel like in the modern day Instagram, book selling, Amazon type of diets, I feel like probably low carb diet was the first, right? Or variations of. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like Atkins diet, shit like that, right? Back in the day. Then it kind of evolved in like a lower carb diet. Then it was like keto, and then now it's carnivore. Is it kind of making sense? Sort of like that, right? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think you're right. The Dave Asprey seemed like he was at the height of like low carb fame, and then something happened. I think people got sick of his product huckstering, and he started to decline. And then carnivore is right there to pick up the steam that I think that he had, the momentum that he had gained.
And so what I was saying too is like those diets now they're coming into a thing of like now it's about fasting, and it's like if you're hungry and you're not feeling good, like stop being a little bitch. You need to train your fasting thing. You need to train your fasting gene or whatever. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they're just connecting these kind of ideas, to get it to fit this carnivore scheme, because it's like you said, it's like everybody knows about hunger, and it's like you get angry when you're hungry, but for them it's like, well, you just need to practice your fasting more now, and it's it's bananas.
Yeah, if I could have $1 for every time somebody called me a little bitch for not fasting. $1,000, that was the primary comment on the first 2-year carnivore diet review. They were like, well, toughen up and do the carnivore diet. And so,
isn't that funny, man? Oh
yeah, so I'm very familiar with that sentiment.
Okay. Just, so when you're fasting, and the same thing that's going on with carnivore, it's sort of a similar situation there, right? Your stress hormones are going up, your cortisol is rising, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And like the two systems that seem to not adapt, whatever that means, is the thyroid system. So it just doesn't like to make us, I guess, like I'm sure Amber O'Hearn has a thing about how it's good to be hypothyroid on a carnivore diet, like the same ways it's good to be insulin resistant. And at least it's consistent. Like she's of a high level of integrity in terms of like not just selling out to, like she will not moderate her message. She agrees and amplifies. Like when somebody says, oh, the diet causes this bad thing, and she's like, oh, hell yeah, it does. And it's good. Like it doesn't matter what it is. It's like whatever is caused by the carnivore diet is good, and I'll explain why.
I like the agree and amplify.
Yeah. And so the thyroid system and the brain, people always talk about, X amount of your brain can actually use up to 40% keto or whatever the percent is. And it's like, okay, all right. So it can use like 100% glucose, almost, and that's fine. And when it's using max ketones, it just seems like people have that is a constant stress that the brain's picking up on. I'm sure it's different at the level of neuropeptides, and I'm sure carnivore or keto people would say those differences are good.
So here's the thing. I want to talk about fasting too with you guys, because it's like, that's definitely the new age or whatever, these terms are goddamn it. Because you say one thing and then people are like, oh, you said new, I'm just saying that's the current, I think, thought process on healing a lot of stuff with people, I think. What are your general thoughts on like fasting as a, medicinal, whatever protocol for certain types of things? Take it, Kyle.
Kyle,
you take it.
It reminds me, I don't really have too much of an opinion about it, except that it just reminds me of people like in the vegan world talking about, this bad symptom's happening to you because you're not veganing hard enough. Like it's an unfalsifiable, like X factor hand waving thing. Like, oh, the problem is like you just haven't starved yourself enough. Like it'll just like that'll clear up. You just need to do like a 24-hour fast and it'll reset, whatever they say. And it's never long enough. It's like I guess maybe if you died from it, they'd go like, oh, maybe it wasn't.
Oh,
Maybe they
shit.
had another problem.
Now you crossed the line.
But up until that, or until you're like hospitalized or something,
Right.
right?
Because
It's just it's not. There's no way to evaluate. I don't see anybody evaluating that on some kind of level where like the level of evidence to say this thing is good is the same they would demand from something else.
Mhm.
You know.
Mhm.
I mean, you might have the precise statistics, but like, how many people suffer from digestive problems and like just not eating? Probably you avoid so many of the common foods that have countless irritants in them, and then the person feels better, and then they're sucked into this kind of like movement, you know. So I think it's super complicated, but yeah, like I think I just talked about this, but like I did the warrior diet every day during my meat and water thing, and only ate at about 6 p.m. every single day. And so I became like very familiar with, like, I'd wake up warm and I get colder and colder and colder and colder and colder till I ate, feel okay, go to bed, and then do that same thing basically every day. But
And why are you getting colder, you think? Just because you're producing less thyroid hormone? What's happening?
I think I was waking up with super high cortisol, and so Kyle can expand on this, but I think the high cortisol is like a high protein diet. It's like kind of thermogenic when it's high, and I was probably at like a lesser phase of stress and when I first started doing this, but and then it just went. I guess my thyroid function got worse throughout the day, and I also became more and more anxious. And if anything got in between me and the meal I was about to eat, it would be like all the wheels would come off. And so, but yeah, man, it's like a nuanced conversation, and as everybody knows, those aren't really appreciated. And so that's why on Twitter, like I was just talking about this, but like people take like some quote of Ray's and they'll just like slam dunk on him, or they'll take something that they think he says. Like, Kyle, I think you responded to somebody that was like said that Ray was advocating antibiotics, but like that's not even really true. You know, like if somebody asks him, I have like horrible digestion or diarrhea all the time, he'll say, have you tried it, penicillin or erythromycin? He's not advocating antibiotics. You know what I mean? It's just like you can't really have those nuanced conversations.
And before
I said,
go ahead.
The person was like, the final straw for me. Oh wait, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
The last straw for me was when he started advocating antibiotics.
Yeah.
And I was like, when did this straw happen? Like 20 years ago? Like,
I honestly think I have a newsletter from the 80s where he talks about penicillin. Like it was a long time ago. And so I thought, I laughed. I thought it was pretty funny.
that person blocked me on Twitter because he said he was talking about honey, and he said unheated honey is better than sucrose or sugar. And I said, why? That's it. And then he said, because unheated honey, unlike heated honey, has enzymes and whatever
minerals, blah blah blah.
And then I was like, okay, that's information comparing honey, unheated honey, to heated honey. You said it's better than sugar, like sucrose. So why is unheated honey or heated honey better than like like
room temperature heated honey?
Like I ask again, and then he said, "Oh, come on! Like bees will abandon a hive if it's even heated a little bit." And then I said, first of all, that could be totally true. And I was just curious, and I was like, "Do you have like a video of this, or like some kind of source showing this?"
Frank Tufano is the source.
And then he goes,
PhD.
"Oh, come on, asking a source for bees, blocked." And it's like I was.
That's sad.
It was sad. And he also said my face looks annoying.
Kyle, you're a handsome bastard. Just want to let everybody
and
know.
His avatar is an eyeball.
Your face is annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure any face is annoying when he's making you look stupid on the internet.
Oh my god! All right, so honey, so you brought it up. So that was a huge thing with me with Paul Saladino. I, unlike you, gentlemen, that didn't listen to Paul Saladino's podcast, I listened to the whole fucking thing. All right, so listen. Here's the thing. He says he eats honey, like a lot of honey, often. Okay, and then direct quote. I'm not like misquoting him. he said, stay away from sugar like it's the plague. Literally, that was the finishing touches towards the end of the podcast. He says, eat nose to tail, eat some vegetables or some fruits here and there seasonally. And then it was like, avoid sugar like it was the plague. So what is the fucking difference between honey and sugar, guys? I mean, is there what? Let's talk about this.
Just before I forget, the
Yes.
funny thing that's happening now is, I think he said maybe on that podcast, but he'll say sugar is okay, or honey rather is okay, but if you have metabolic syndrome, you should not eat any. And this is actually the same exact argument I remember in 2011. All the same people were saying this same thing, except saying starches. And they're like, yeah, starches, there's nothing wrong with them, but if you have metabolic syndrome, do not eat them, period.
Rob
And
Wolf said that.
Yeah. That whole group would all kind of say the same thing. And so it's, again, it's very reminiscent of like that 10 years ago similar situation. But I'll pass the honey compared to sucrose off to you.
Well, if you heat a beehive even slightly, the bees will abandon it. So,
Duh.
ergo.
You know what? Your
will
face is
abandon it
stupid,
as
bro.
if it's the plague. So, Paul Saladino is he's like extremely respectful of bees, and he's like, sucrose, heated honey, abandoned hive.
Abandoned.
Yeah, it's I mean there's like some cool stuff in honey, like different chemicals that some people think are therapeutic. But does that like substantially alter the way the body metabolizes the fructose and the glucose in the honey compared to sucrose? No. No, it doesn't.
Because honey, for people that don't know, right? It's fructose, glucose, and sucrose, right? And
it's high fructose. It's basically high fructose bee syrup.
Yeah. So to say that you eat honey and to stay away from sugar like it was the plague doesn't make any fucking sense, does it, boys?
I'd be interested to bounce this off you guys, but I feel like people don't a general misconception is they don't understand the stakes. They're thinking everybody is starting from this level playing field, and so have this like naturalistic or puritanical tendency, but they're like most people aren't, and most people aren't realizing like how bad things are. So maybe if that was front and center, like they wouldn't like obsess over honey versus like white sugar. Does that make any sense, or do you feel similarly, either of you?
Yeah, man. Tell me more what you mean by things are so bad, though. What do you mean?
Well, kind of what we were talking about last time. Like the environment is very like it's harming us, or we're being harmed all the time. Or if the number of I don't want to get your podcast removed from YouTube. The number of things that happen to you upon being born, the number of X-rays a person got with dental. I used to have braces. I used to get X-rays all the time.
Oh fuck, man.
So again, I'd say the stakes, or they don't know how bad things are, or so again, like arguing over these trivial things is I guess worth it to some people, but I think it's kind of minutia that doesn't matter.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah. That I actually had a note about that, which was that. Let me see here. It was kind of stream of consciousness. The micronutrient thing is dumb. How they're talking about it is dumb.
I thought of
vitamin C thing
if you
and
wanna...
all of these specific nutrient effects. Okay, basically, Saladino has a holistic, like plants bad perspective, but the way they're going about it is this tedious accounting of like, hey, this vitamin, like, as Joe Rogan will be like, hey, I heard that there's vitamin C, and don't you need that? And then it almost seems like scripted, because Joe Rogan, there's no way he's talked to all of these people. He's extremely wealthy and famous and around people. He did the carnivore diet. There's no way that he hasn't talked to somebody who told him these things about micronutrients and like, well, actually the liver has, blah, blah, blah. And all of the things that Saladino was using, he would have a single study. Like, oh, look, in this study, there was no benefit to vitamin C, like this one study. And it's like, okay, that is, what is the point of that? Like to show, is that indicative of all studies? Is that the only time that this experiment, like, is that the only time vitamin C has been tested on people in some kind of response? I don't think so.
The vitamin C is a better point than what I was trying, my ramble. Like they'll say, oh, it's not necessary, but that's like totally divorced from us in our environment. Like who's to say a higher level of vitamin C wouldn't be largely therapeutic in the environment we have it like right now. Like at least in the case of carnivores, they're trying to like fit the script, and the stuff that like, doesn't fit the script they'll toss away. But I think you're right. I think that's why I think I was turned off from watching the whole thing, because it was so there's like softball questions, and I wasn't expecting him to grill him or anything, but it was just like, Joe, you've had to have heard this stuff before. You know, it was so basic.
Well, you got to account for his audience too. You know, he's trying to get people.
But he wasn't presenting it like, hey, for the audience, and it didn't have that vibe. It had the vibe like,
they're buddies.
I'm like kind of dumb and I don't know anything. Like, could you explain this to me? And
right.
It's like,
right.
Sucks. Like it's bad.
Well,
acting.
he started the podcast by saying he takes a lot of his supplements and stuff like that. So already there's that kind of, like, I'm on your team kind of thing, So, but with
Saladino supplements?
Yeah. He has supplements now.
Oh, I missed that part.
Oh yeah, go to Heart and Soil. He has a big line of supplements.
Yeah,
Wait,
Danny,
Heart
goddammit, why are you
and Soil?
advertising for him? This is free advertising.
His website's Heart and Soil.
Yes, Heart.
Yeah, I think
Heart and
didn't
Soil.
catch this. He said it like 38 times in the Joe Rogan thing.
You were so turned off immediately. It was like the first thing they talked about.
Is that like a blood and soil reference? I'm just saying.
Kyle,
I don't know.
In the indigenous culture of the Kalaki tribe, the tribe, they give the hearts to the people, and it means a lot.
It's like a mistranslation of like a National Socialist speech, like, and we will defend our heart and soil.
This is why
sell supplements.
This is why I asked Ray about the desiccated liver, because
Yeah.
he had a quote saying that those desiccated liver products had like tons of oxidative products in them, and that they were like a shadow of actual liver. But like Paul and Ancestral Supplements and a bunch of other companies, they sell big bottles of desiccated liver for like $50, and it's just again, I don't care if people eat liver or don't eat liver, but I get emails from people that are like, "Don't worry, I'm eating liver. I'm taking these tablets," and I'm like,
Oh, God.
I don't think they're really the same thing,
And they smell like fucking shit. And real liver, if you get like a fresh liver at a butcher, it doesn't smell like shit. No, seriously. Because again, through the Vince Gironda thing, I've been there, done that too. I used to buy them and I'd open it up and I'd be like, like I'd want to fucking throw up right away, right into the bottle. You know what I mean? So, yeah, like.
Yeah. Well, that would help to that, because then you'd be adding bile.
Oh,
to it.
Oh yeah, that's really good for you. Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry guys, heartandsoil.com.
Yeah, I never took those, and I was just lucky because I guess I kind of have to give credit where credit's due. Like I was on a sort of carnivore diet, and I was eating raw organs and stuff, and forcing myself to. And so when I was like, wait, I can like cook the liver, like or like, wait, I can eat like cooked kidneys and not like the most disgusting acrid raw kidneys. It's like, this is like, it was such an upgrade for me that I don't even know what it's like for somebody to go from liver and organs the other direction, where they're eating hamburger meat and like normal meat, and then they're eating organs. I was coming at it from this like way grosser food. So I never had an issue with it at all. So, because I'm always telling people to eat liver, and they're like, oh, it's so hard. And I'm like, I actually do. I'm like, dude, shut up.
Stop being a little bitch.
Well, Paul has a video, I think it was about a year, maybe a few months ago, but it is what he eats in a day, and it's all like raw thymus and raw liver, and
I haven't
like,
seen that. Really?
Oh, you gotta check it out. But I'm
Jesus.
like, do not even.
Well, guys, you see, that's what I'm talking about. That's the American selling version thing of everything you guys do to stuff here. Like, for example, like, we have saunas in Russia, like, since, I don't know, there's like the oldest sauna still exists in Moscow. Okay. It's like 1800 something, and we have cold water plunges, and I came here, I remember moving here, and here it's like this like thing, you got to pay for it. It's like $100. And now you guys have the machines that you go inside, and it's crazy cold. And instead of being in there for 10 minutes like most people are, you can only be in there you can only be in there for 2 minutes because it's like 1,000 million degrees hotter or colder. You know what I'm saying? It becomes this thing where people kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily only the American kind of mind, but they need this like catch thing. So when they see a guy that's like eating thymus, like you said, they're going to be like, holy shit, that's so cool. I want to do that, man. You know what I mean? That's where it comes from. It's not even necessarily that they're thinking, oh, wow, like that makes a lot of sense. That sounds very healthy. That sounds like something that we all should be doing. It's more like, I can fucking do that. It's like that Borat scene. Remember that Borat scene when Borat? Did you guys see the first Borat? You know, he's like cruising around America, and then he meets those guys in the RV, and then he's like, in the Kazakhstan, we play little game. We put cheese in the hole of penis, and we, you know, and the guy just kind of goes, I'll fucking do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's that thing that right away the guy's like, I'll fucking do that. So it's what it comes down to, you know.
Yeah, Sacha Baron Cohen, it ruined his vibe forever for me. After, did you see his ADL speech? It's like it's the absolute worst thing. He was like actively calling for censorship.
Yeah.
Anyways, we don't have
funny,
to talk
right?
about that. But
go ahead, man. Funny. Coming from the guy that fucking made Borat, right? It's hilarious.
Do you know what we're talking about, Kyle?
Yeah, you might not want to say ADL on YouTube.
God damn it, guys! I'm gonna ban my podcast again.
Let's just say a bunch of random letters like XPLZJKO.
Well, I got one for the V word.
Catching the acronym.
Yeah, for the V word that you were saying that you get, you know, those things at the beginning. You can call them, like, you can say it backwards, like Senicavs or something like that. I've heard that somewhere. Senicav. You know what I'm saying?
You can snip that out if it's
whatever, dude. I don't give a fuck. I mean, as long as they don't ban me. But anyway.
Well, it's not. I don't think so. Again, I might be a hardcore conspiracy theorist, but I think the shadow banning is real. I think so. If you say something and they transcript it and it hits these key words, they'll just basically you like our episodes with Ray do not show up in search.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my stuff doesn't show up in search, and so but that's new. And so if you type in Ray Pete, like every single video I have is like says his name multiple times, and
it should be the first. And I don't think your stuff is always. It's not the first there, is it?
No. So, but again, the recent live streams we do not even show up. And then again, I'm not saying they have it out for me or anything, but like the live stream chat of the last live stream on Friday just is gone. It doesn't. I have it checked to be available. It's just not even there.
No doubt, dude. Especially nowadays, because everything is just becoming that way. You can't say anything now, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Police.
I'm looking at this what Carnivore MD eats in a day.
Yes.
I brought it up and I'm scrubbing through it on YouTube, and he's wearing makeup, right?
What?
I didn't catch that.
No.
I'm sorry, but I'm really, after the thing with Frank Tufano and then looking up who he was, I'm very sensitive to like carnivores that use makeup.
I didn't catch that. My point for bringing that was bringing that up was what he's eating. Don't even tell me that you enjoy eating that.
Right.
It's totally disgusting.
That's what I'm saying.
I would
it's
not
just to
believe
look
anything.
fucking cool, man. It's like he looks cool eating raw thymus. Such a badass.
He looks like a badass. He kind of has to do that because he's not like he looks fine. He looks like a normal guy, but he's not like really jacked or anything. So he kind of has to get sort of like a tough credential. And this is a way to be tough. It's like I would be. It's sort of like saying you would be the guy in some hunter-gatherer tribe to just like tear into a corpse like with your bare teeth or whatever.
Well, like imagine if he was like a guy from Mississippi with a giant gut and like, you know, a beard and 2 teeth, and he was saying he's eating this stuff and he's very healthy. Like nobody would pay attention to that, right? Nobody would pay attention to that. So he doesn't even need to be jacked, you know, he just needs to be lean enough. If, like I said, that's what I was saying on an earlier podcast with both of you guys. It's like, you know, as soon as people see like a lean guy, they're just like, that's it. He knows what the fuck he's talking about, you know, and it's just like, I don't know, man. Of course, like you do have, like, again, if you see a fat motherfucker that's just like, you know, so out of shape and looks terrible, probably don't listen to him. You know, I have this thing I say like to like my clients. I say like, you know, like don't judge a book by its cover, but like read the book too. You know what I'm saying? Just like start reading the book and check it out too. It's not like, you know, you do like have to pay attention to. You can't just make a blanket statement like judge the book by the cover or don't. It's just too simplified.
Right. Don't ignore the cover.
Don't ignore the cover. The cover is important, but you got to read the book too. You know what I mean? like a little
Well,
bit.
we would have found out more about the book if he had accepted my invitation to debate Kyle, but unfortunately, we'll never know.
Paul Saladino, if you're out there, let's do a fucking invitation.
So
Let's do this.
this was when he was doing the regular debates, and getting real jazzed off him. This was like a year ago, and I had a civil back and forth with him, but he said he didn't have enough time.
Somebody else recommended that on his website. I found it. Like somebody shared it with me or something, and it was like, hey, you kind of have a similar but slightly different thing than this guy, and he's like, oh yeah, I'd love to, or oh, that sounds or something like really non-committal, like that sounds interesting. And then
I might know what you're talking about. It was on a podcast, right?
Yeah, like in the comment section. And they probably just like Google my name, and then he's like, nah.
Well.
So I hate doctors. Like I don't hate them. Like now I hate. They have like I began to hate them because their behavior has, first of all, it's totally a marketing thing. That's another thing I said in my notes a couple times. This just comes off as super marketing. Like he's taking Chris Masterjohn, like almost word for word things that he said 5 years ago about, actually, we need some oxidative products for cellular communication, but you don't want this much, and just putting MD next to it and like selling a book. Or I guess he's like a little bit better looking than Chris Masterjohn. I mean, that's not like a dig or anything. I'm just,
you son of a bitch.
I'm just trying to explain like what I'm seeing here. And for some reason there is this, I guess it's because we have a medical cartel that limits the amount of doctors and it makes them like a priestly caste. But even in the Joe Rogan thing, I remember at one point he said, they were talking about this vegan and they were like, oh, this is the best vegan because he's very open-minded. He's like a nice guy and stuff, but he's not a scientist. And it's like, dude, you're not a fucking scientist. Like, fuck off.
Yeah. Well, he has the letters MD
on
it.
Doctor. Like he learned about this carnivore stuff
outside of medical school completely.
Like a couple years ago.
Well, I thought that was disingenuous. There's some interview he did where I think I posted on my Twitter, but he was saying it was when he was kind of tiptoeing into the carbohydrate thing, and he said something like, I've noticed that my carnivore patients, their blood sugar creeps up. And I'm like, dude, you've been doing this for like you've been experimenting on yourself for like a year, and then you've been prescribing it to your patients. Like how like ridiculous. Do you know somebody super well after a year of dating? Like I would argue you're just starting to know them. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so
then the crazy clown comes out.
Yeah.
You see that meme where it's like, like me, like the guy's like, if I'm going to give you this dick, you're not going to go crazy on me. And then the woman's like, no. And then he gives her the dick and she's like in a clown mask, like doing fucking backflips and shit, Oh, man.
Yeah, man. It was, what can we say? It's the business of being an authority. You have to do that crazy stuff to maintain this air of authority. And you have people like Kyle who are ostensibly the Joker of chaos, throwing a wrench into the authorities' plans and their perception. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because like, let's just be real. Like, if these people, like, who's that Australian guy who's a pretty big carnivore guy, Bart?
Oh yeah, Bart.
Oh, bald-headed guy. Yeah. I can't fucking stand listening to that guy. He's just like, yeah, mate. Good day. He's just, God, I just want to.
Honestly,
it's so annoying.
Australian racism.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. What are you gonna say, Daddy?
Well, I was just gonna say, if these people were interested in like the truth, then they would talk to people like me. And it's just because there's nobody that I. Like if somebody was like, look, I'm a vegan, or if somebody was like, I'm a breatharian, and I want to have you on my thing to like discuss things or even debate or whatever. Like, I mean, unless I thought, I don't know, they were so crazy that it was like dangerous to me to just get involved. Which I don't think is, you get what I'm saying. Like I don't have any problem. I don't have a problem talking to people that don't know stuff or that know things that I think like that know anti stuff, like incorrect information. or that have a different perspective. The only people that would have problems with that are people that are trying to, like have a curated presence online for the purposes of like selling product or whatever.
For reference, Bart would talk with you, but I think you'd be doing him a benefit though, because
let's do it. Let's set it up, guys.
I think he's looking for content, but I mean, if you watch one of his debate, like somebody came into one of my live streams, was like debate Bart, and I'm just you're willing to go to territory that I would never be willing to go to, because I don't think it's especially super useful to talk to somebody that is like kind of out of control. You know what I mean? And so that is like, in my old age of 35, is like kind of like a turnoff. And it's the same reason I don't like engage with people in comments and stuff. I just think it's kind of useless, And so I used to do that, and over time it's just become less and less appealing, because you know how you can, the phrasing of things, you can kind of tell where a person is coming from and what they're bringing up and what they're not bringing up. And it's like you can't argue with stupid. It's not super fun.
It's like the presidential debates, right? It's like I was just talking about it with with a friend too. It's like, do you think anybody actually watches those debates and kind of goes like, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm gonna vote for the other fucking guy. Like, nobody ever does that, right? Everybody already has their mind made up, and I think people just want to see the drama, man. A lot of times, they don't really want to listen to your opinion.
It's internet blood sports on presidential debate stage now. Which
yeah.
I mean, I think it's great. It's like, let's formalize the degeneracy. It's already
exactly.
I didn't know Bart. I didn't know you thought he was like out of control. I only watched the one video of his where he's speaking with a woman, and they bring you up, Danny. This is like probably a year ago.
So let me rephrase this. I don't not like him or anything, but have you seen his debates?
Oh, no, I haven't. So that
okay. So that would speak volumes. I'm just saying it deteriorates quickly into like ad hominem, and so so again, though, like I'm not Kyle. You are so skilled in debate. Like it's not my forte even at all. And so. I'd appreciate watching you two. I just don't think I don't know, is like, I don't know. Again, I've seen a number of his debates, and they get to like literally calling somebody like a fucktard, and it's just like, okay, this isn't especially useful or for the audience or whatever. But that something I liked about Jay Dyer a while ago is his first debates, like with Adam Kokesh. He was actually extremely calm and would kind of explain things in a way that like I could understand. And I love that style of debate, but I could never do it myself. I'm not good at like that type of thing. So the debates of yours, Kyle, I really think you're just an excellent person at staying even keeled and then pulling up this like vast knowledge bank. And so I admire that.
Oh, thank you.
We can do it. We can set it up. And if fucktards get out of control, I'll start saying fucktard, because I'm really good at that,
Well, I wanted a Paul
I'll control.
or what's the Jack dude's name? D Agostino, but he doesn't care. He like works for the military. So
what happened to that? What happened to that fucking guy? Although I remember looking at that guy's Instagram account, and like he was doing all these experiments with like he'd be like keto for like a year. Or something. No, not that long. He'd be keto for like a few months, and then he'd like eat like a bunch of cookies, and then have like a blood glucose monitor. And it's like, look, my blood went up. All this, and it's just like, dude, you haven't been fucking eating carbohydrates like ever. Of course, it's gonna go up like crazy. But it's also like, to me, like he's constantly refueling his keto like thing. So I don't know how like useful cookies. It is. Say it again.
Yep. I mean, cookies. Like if you just eat a bunch of cookies, I'm sure your sugar would go up. And what the hell does that even? Anyway, actually. When I was on the Raw Paleo forum, there somebody posted a video, and it wasn't somebody that I was arguing with or anything. It was like, how sometimes somebody that you agree with will post something that you think is dumb, and you're kind of like, what's going on? Like, and it was like a doctor or somebody talking about, I don't know whether they were saying pizza was bad or vegetable oil was bad, but he was like taking his blood glucose with a glucometer. and then drinking like a glass of vegetable oil and then eating a pizza and showing how much his blood glucose went up. And I'm like, does anybody on earth think that that's good? Like somebody's like, damn it, like I do that every day. You're saying my sugar's gonna go up?
Dude, I just had a smoothie. I just had a vegetable smoothie with pizza inside.
Yeah, like I always put a cup of vegetable oil on my pizza.
Oh, man.
Like even if you just ate, I didn't even know what he was saying. Like, first of all, your blood sugar going up after eating is not bad. Like one, two, you're eating two things. It's not like, and I watched the video. This is a long time ago. I'm talking like 10 years ago. Then I was on this forum. I'm pretty sure he just did this experiment. I think he was trying to show how long it took for it to come back down. Like it went up and then it stayed up for a while. But he ate like a whole pizza. But he didn't have a separate video or another thing where he just ate a whole pizza without drinking the vegetable oil. So I'm like, what are you like? You know what I mean? It's like,
what's the point? You just have that Jackie Chan meme,
like,
right?
What are you telling me?
Right.
So I should just drink vegetable oil without pizza? Is that what you're saying? Like, I should take my vegetable oil by itself and then later have the pizza? Like, I didn't get it at all. And yeah, that's like these people that are like, oh my God, I drank like a big gulp and my glucose went up. Like keto confirmed, like it's better. Yeah. And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah, wow. Durian Rider was right that the peak doesn't matter much.
Well, yeah, it's been a long time since I heard that name. Oh man, good times. Well, you know, at the same time, what'd you say?
Durian Rider versus Bart.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Ooh, in a death match, they fucking naked wrestling. I love it.
Well, there was actually a three-way kind of talk or conversation between Durian Rider and then two carnivore advocates, and I think Durian Rider came off the best out of all of them. Like he was, again, I know he, like that's weird to say considering his like his online history or whatever, but he was, he seemed more self-aware than the carnivore people. Like the carnivore people were trying to tear him down. Like, oh, this is my chance. I hate this guy and I'm going to let him know it. Mm-hmm. And Durian Rider was like kind of weirded out that they were so like vitriolic on the stream. And I remember being like, dude, this is so weird. Like, it was such a strange stream, but again, he seemed the coolest out of all of them.
He just doesn't care, dude. That's what it is. That's the secret.
Well, he's been attacked, and like he's been swimming upstream.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah, for a long time, and he's been saying like he was doing extremes arguing like before YouTube existed. Yeah. You know, yeah. So. Yeah, he's gonna like these like Johnny come latelys who are like, oh, I discovered the carnivore diet 2 years ago, and I'm gonna like yell at somebody on the internet. Like, there's just no way that they're gonna, like they don't know what they're getting into.
Well, you guys got to remember though, there are people out there. Because you guys have been in this game for so long, and I've been in it for some time too. And it's just like there are people that, dude, again, when they see Paul Saladino eat some thymus glands, I mean, they're just like it blows their mind, and it's super cool. And so
hey, speaking of glands, real quick,
what's that?
I tricked. Well, I don't know if tricked the right word, but I had a potluck back in graduate school, and there's like a bunch of former graduate students of Rutgers that I got to eat like thymus. I think lung, like a few different things, because I made. Do you know what rumaki is? It's like a water chestnut, something, and then bacon with like in a toothpick. So that something was like weird glands and stuff. I brought it to a potluck, and I told everybody later. They didn't mind it at all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's for sure,
they minded
dude.
It after I told them. I'm saying they didn't.
Yeah.
Some people were actually they were like, oh wow, I feel like I'm cool now because I ate something that was hardcore.
Isn't that funny how much? Yeah, a lot of people, they don't even do it's such a mind thing, right? Like what they're eating. So I wanted to give Paul some credit though, guys. Come on, I mean, he did talk about like the vegetable oil stuff, which again, some people are just still not aware of it, But he specifically kept mentioning linoleic acid. He didn't say like that was the big point. I mean, tell me more about the acids in the fucking vegetables oils, guys.
Well, that's a marketing thing, because these people are very aware that they're going to alienate a substantial amount of their potential audience if they go after the fish fatty acids. So they may say PUFA in general are bad, but if they single something out, it's going to be linoleic acid because it's basically a safe target. Like nobody defends vegetable oil and nobody thinks it's good. There's people that don't know about it. There's people that don't care. There's vegans that are like, well, it's better than saturated fat, but he's not speaking to them anyway. So of any of his potential audience, it's literally just a marketing choice. I don't even know if he thinks for 1 second whether, the longer chain fatty acids in fish, or what your body makes out of the linoleic acid, elongating it and desaturating it are the same or worse or less bad or whatever. I don't again, I don't think he's really that interested. I think he's like, is this a piece of information that I can make money off of?
Right. So you think he just kind of pulled that linoleic, specifically that thing, from somewhere, and then he's just going with it because that's the devil, but he's not even aware of the other stuff.
It might even just be a marketer's instinct to just know where the path of least resistance is. Like, I'm going to talk about this because a lot of he might see comments on his things where people are talking about taking omega-3 supplements or fish oils, and he doesn't want to alienate those people.
I could be wrong. Does he talk about? Doesn't he talk negatively about DHA and EPA on his like controversial thoughts videos? I think he does, right? But he didn't bring it up on Joe's show.
I'm not sure about
I haven't watched all of his stuff, so I mean, if it's I guess like that would be cool if he did that, but it's almost like he that he's gonna bring out like the greatest hits on the Joe Rogan thing. Like it just, I don't know, it just has a vibe where, because honestly, again, I wouldn't mind talking to somebody and I wouldn't even be insulting. Like it's like, okay, you're this guy, you do this diet, you have actual patience, which is something that I don't have. So I can at least like respect that. But again, if it's just going to be like somebody that's crafting their phrasing and the things they decide to focus on based on like what's okay to say or what would come across better, like when they say processed food is bad or processed sugar, that's just throwing red meat, no pun intended, to the crowd. Because everybody thinks that. It's just there's no reason to even say that. The only time you should ever talk about processed food or sugar is if you're saying it's good, because there's nobody that thinks it's good. And it's like somebody getting on like the presidential debate stage and being like, hey, racism's bad. And like,
right.
Like there's
all the
saying,
typical shit.
This is marketing. You're just like establishing yourself positively in the audience's that's distasteful to me. Yeah. I'd rather establish myself as like a bad person and then struggle back to get into the good graces of the audience. You're like, I like racism. Now let me tell you why my platform is good.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's actually a challenge.
I don't know. You were talking about the EPA, DHA. I don't know. I do remember at the podcast that they did talk about essential fatty acids, and there was like, no, I don't think they even are aware of anything of the, of some of the studies talking about, are they even essential? It was just kind of a thing that, I think Joe asked Paul if grass-fed meat had more essential fatty acids than grain-fed meat. So that was the only, and that's where I was like, oh, he's not really aware of this stuff.
Maybe I'm misremembering. I could have swore, I know he talks negatively about linoleic acid, but they don't talk about things like prostaglandins or the isoprostanes and the neuroprostanes and the chrolein. Like they never go as deep as Ray. I'm sure maybe in this next year he will integrate some of those ideas into his own stuff, because you and I talked about this, Kyle, or maybe it's Georgia, I don't know. But people in the health world do like to be progressive in some way, so they need new stuff to talk about, like intermittently. Since he's already diving down this kind of like mimicry of what Ray's done, I can't imagine he won't like take more. Like when are they going to start talking about carbon dioxide? I guarantee at some point they will, because even Chris Masterjohn in 2013, 2014, when you talk about vitamin K, like you have to talk about the carboxylation or whatever. Like you have to talk about carbon dioxide, and so and that would actually support kind of his honey theory, or so if somebody's talking about carbon dioxide, they are strictly lifting it from Ray, because I can't think of any, maybe Boteco, like I can't think of anybody else that thinks carbon dioxide is important stuff.
Boteco method.
Well, if they're talking about it in a way, it's like we hear them, like we pick up. Like people can talk about carbon dioxide, but if they're talking about it as like, oh, it's protective of like protein amide bonds, like it's like, okay, loud and clear, like you just read a Ray Peat article like from the website with like the ice cream cone, and you're just not giving credit, because again, it's like that's just, I don't know, it's really bad. I mean, Chris Masterjohn, I was kind of annoyed that I don't think he's ever given any credit to Ray Peat. I could be wrong. At that time, when he was talking about vitamin K, I don't think he was doing it. However, a bunch of people rip off Chris Masterjohn, so I'm almost just like, whatever. That dude's kind of like he's getting ripped off left and right by all these like.
There was one video. Yeah, there was one video. I googled Chris Masterjohn Ray Peat, and there was only one video that I could find. And he said somebody asked him about something Ray Peat, and he just said like, I like some of his ideas, but I don't necessarily agree with everything that he has to say. But I think it's interesting. That's something like that. That was just about it. That's all that I've heard.
That's like Chris. Like I like Chris, but that's also one of those kind of nonsense statements. It's like, yeah, of course, nobody like perfectly syncs up with somebody else. Do I always have to say that?
Yes.
Like when I
ain't that funny? Yes, yeah, it's so true, dude. Especially in the fitness world too, or like like even with like training stuff. It's like, well, I don't agree with everything, but I'm copying 75% of fucking everything he has to say, and I'm selling it to people, but I don't agree with everything he has to say, and it's just like come on.
It's a pre-canned answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris did good work. It was funny because he came out with like a series of articles, I think, on the carbon dioxide and the fat solubles, and it was picked up by nobody. You mentioned that, and nobody in Weston A. Price or paleo or keto, like nobody was even remotely interested in like, I don't know, like picking that up and talking about it. And so, yeah, but I have respect for Chris, but yeah, there's no but to that statement. I have respect for him. He's been in this, I think, a long time.
Yeah, he's definitely like proven himself as like he seems to have integrity. He's actually a good resource for a lot of things. That same thing though, I remember back when I was first getting into Ray, or maybe I don't know, maybe it's a couple years in, but I think I just Googled his name and was somehow, because I never read Mark. What was Mark's Daily Apple? Yeah, I never read his stuff really. Like just a handful of articles, but I found him talking about what is it, resistant starches, and somebody was like, "Oh, well, Ray Peat says," and then Mark was like, "Oh, I like Ray Peat, I really do, but sometimes I think he misses the forest for the trees," or and it was a very similar thing where it's like, "Oh, I think his stuff is really interesting, but I totally disagree," and it's just like, why?
Yeah. Also, I haven't read any of this stuff.
Yeah, like that's the other thing. It's like, can you explain that? Like people are like, "Oh, I don't really agree with that." And it's like, "Oh, awesome. It's so great because like we're on a podcast so we can talk about that." But no, they just like
well,
like, sensitive to that. You can see that they'll just be like, "Oh yeah, like processed food's bad. Like let's get that out of the way." Like, why? Like yeah, I thought your audience was stupid. Like we've already talked about a bunch of like audience's stupid background things. So, why don't we just, so you could just see like they're just like fitting blocks into like pre-made holes to sort of just like they're putting railroad track in front of them as they're moving this thing along. And they just stop at the stops they want to stop at. And it just doesn't, it just comes across as very intentional.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but us all having gone on our own journeys, you kind of understand the roadblocks, And so for example, if I'm communicating with somebody and they like vehemently disagree with something, I won't like put up a big fight about it. And then occasionally a month 6 months, a year, 2 years later, that same person will email me back and say, hey, when we were talking, I really didn't understand what this concept was, but now having gone through more, like I understand it, and so yeah, it's like Leo and I talked about this last time, but it's just like the certitude is the most annoying part. Like Marxists and kind of like in I don't know, signaling the right word, saying like, oh yeah, I parsed through all Ray's work, but I didn't find it compelling. Like, and that's not true at all. You know what I mean? Right. And so that's why when Bart came in the chat of one of my live streams, like I said earlier, and I was like, dude, I'm much less interested in your critique of like these thyroid concepts, and I'm more interested in your like steel man of Ray's work. And then I could know like maybe we're on the same page, because somebody can't just tell you about Ray and then you automatically understand the bioenergetic point of view. It's like very complex, and I'm not saying Bart's incapable of understanding it, but it's like I imagine it would take some time to like fully integrate it and be able to contrast like the low carb with what Ray is saying.
Mm-hmm. Takes time. You can't. Everybody just wants a tidbit. You want like we talked about with you guys. Carbs are bad, or don't eat all plants, right? Well, I do want to bring it back to Paul again. I just want to talk about, because let's talk about it as if we have a dumb audience who doesn't understand anything. I mean, his big thing with the diet, it's like right. He said I eat a lot of meat and organs and seasonal fruits here and there. And honey. And then later on, of course, he said in the podcast, I have it like quoted, it was like, when you give rats and humans a lot of fructose, they don't do too good. And I was like thinking, like, well, isn't honey like fructose mostly, bro? But anyway, I mean, let's talk about the meat thing. So what would be some of the drawbacks from what you guys know in eating tons of meat every day and organs? I'm
gonna pass this one to Kyle.
Go, sir.
Well, I mean, there's the different genres of problems. There's the low carb problem, the cortisol problem, if you're relying on that because he said, he brought up gluconeogenesis on the Joe Rogan thing, and then he didn't correct Joe when Joe was like, oh yeah, if you eat too much protein, and I forget exactly how he phrased it, but he's like, your body's gonna and it's like, no, your body's always doing gluconeogenesis at some level. And it just gets out of hand, because the glucose demands that your body is constantly putting for this thing that is supposedly, that we're all just going to pretend on these podcasts is like bad, even though your body's like chopping up its own lean tissue to get it.
Yeah, you sorry to interrupt you, but you reminded me that he did say, though, he said like your body needs glucose, and it was like he really vehemently say that, and I was like, so like I'm wondering, like what's the disconnect there. So
they're getting, because that's what I think. Danny, didn't I send this to you on Twitter, like something about brand friendly changes or something? That's the way that you have to think of this stuff. Is like, he'll say, because he'll get challenged, and these people will be like, oh man, I just learned about gluconeogenesis. It's like, how do I integrate this into my brand? Instead of just being like, okay, this is what gluconeogenesis is. X percent of your amino acids go to glucose on a high carb diet. Some number larger than X, some multiple times X as your diet gets lower in carbohydrate. And if you just said that, then a lot of people would be like, wow, that kind of almost seems like your body wants carbohydrate and is willing to sacrifice like really important nutrients to get it. So they just don't say it. They just kind of go, oh yeah, here's the word gluconeogenesis. Say it, you'll sound smart. And then they just kind of step over it.
Exactly.
And like, yeah, so you'll get like all the sugar you need from meat, and it's fine, and you just eat enough fat. And they don't go into it. But yeah, so the problem would be with eating meat.
Yeah.
If you think that's bad, that's a whole other thing.
Well, I want to talk about it. Why would you think it's not bad? Why wouldn't you think it's bad, you think?
I don't even have an opinion. No, I think it's bad because it mimics the starvation state. And I just don't think that
Mhm.
living like that is the way that people are. There's this idea that that was the basic, I don't know, state of man in pre-agricultural times.
Mhm.
I don't think that's true. And furthermore, I don't think it's good, even if it was true. So, I think like cortisol, chronically high cortisol. I mean, it's clearly a disease state,
Mhm.
and everybody admits that outside of a local. It's like, oh, like you have high cortisol, that's a problem. It's like, Mom, I'm gonna look up that. Like, oh, okay, well, it's okay. Like,
Right.
See, I think very few, like maybe Amber's the only, her and Charles Washington are like the only one that even admit that that is like a possibility. You know what I mean? And so usually like Paul's whole thing, like he commented on my video saying that like there was zero evidence that there was like a higher activity of the sympathetic nervous system on keto. Like that was his big sticking point. And so there's again, the stress physiology like isn't even baked into the concept. It's like a totally other foreign thing. Like how many times do the keto people or carnivore people even talk about stress? Like barely
Right.
ever.
Now, do you think it's because they haven't hit kind of quote unquote that wall or whatever it could be? Because some people just start feeling like shit. Their temperatures drop like yours, or they start getting anxiety, depression, or whatever the symptoms are. You think it's just maybe because they haven't hit that wall?
How strong their constitution is.
well, Paul Saladino hit the wall and started eating honey, and Joe
Right.
Rogan started getting pissed off at everybody, and he went back and he got off of carnivore. Like that's
So,
like,
yeah.
that's the end of the conversation as far as I'm concerned. It's like you failed.
Yes, I totally agree
your
with you.
Diet failed.
Yes. I heard. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, people keep coming or still come at me on Twitter, and I'm like, dude, your golden boy defected. It's
Right.
like, why are you still talking about this? And
Well,
like
because they're attached to that idea.
Yeah, I know there's still people like Sean Baker and stuff, but it's man, if Paul can't do it, and and he has presumably infinite resources to do so, I think that really tells you something.
Right. And Rogan was saying that, it was funny because the way that Rogan talks about it, he's like, well, I eat meat and and it's fucking great and I love it. But just like, I just want some pasta. And I'm like, well, yes, that's why you want some pasta, because you're just eating meat or you're tired of it, man. So I don't know. I guess it takes a while. I think people think that it's more of a, it's just in your head kind of thing. It's not that their body is physiologically, craving those things or wanting those things, because I think there is we're all kind of taught this disconnect that your body is just outside of your mind, and if you're insane, it's just in your head, you can cure it, sort of like what you guys talked about on your last live stream, Danny, which was great with Georgia. It was meditation, where it's just everything, all your problems can be fixed just by focusing your mind in the right direction or not focusing in it, right? And it's yeah, maybe some stuff, but I don't think it's exclusive. You know what I mean? I definitely think that there's definitely a body-mind connection, and not a lot of people talk about that.
Straight from the source.
Just to finish up the meat thing real quick.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, man.
The other thing is that, okay, so I'm just gonna call a shot. So you said the thing about CO2, Danny, and I swear to God, if one of these guys starts talking about phosphate content in meat, I'm gonna lose my shit.
Paul kind of did, but you're right. That's another tip off that they are secretly.
If he starts doing eggshell calcium, because that's my first shot, and the second one, well, this will be the overall shot I'm calling. He is going to market a high meat, but containing many pro-metabolic foods to sort of rescue the person from the carnivore issues, that is marketable under his brand of carnivore. So what I said about honey is carnivore sugar or carnivore syrup or whatever, meat syrup or whatever I called it. Because again, it's the same exact way. If you had these people hooked up to a neuro scan thing, the same area of the brain that vegans and vegetarians, that light up for them when they think about how plant foods have a mystical property, is happening to foods derived from animals in these carnivores. It has become a religion, and that is why honey is different than sugar, because it's produced by animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mhm.
it is holy, or it's special. It's like ritualistically clean, whatever. It is religiously it's different. That's again why he could never explain scientifically why it's different. He's like, well, it has some enzymes in it. It's like, no, it is religiously different. And you know what else is different? Or a carnivore way to solve the phosphate calcium balance problem is eggshell calcium,
Because it's
which
eggs.
happens to be from animals.
Mhm.
So,
I could
Right.
be wrong. I feel like he has a bone meal product in his supplement line.
Yeah, I think
Can
so.
we-
Yeah, yeah.
I'm almost certain he does.
Check it out if you want, but I'm
Maybe
pretty
check
sure.
heart and soil calcium because
Right.
he did acknowledge parathyroid hormone. He rarely talks about it, but he has mentioned that a few times. But yeah, you're right. This is a total repeat thing that will be interesting if
Yeah.
penetrates that community.
And maybe milk. I don't know. What's his view on milk? I think I've heard him say you can have it, right? Because it's an animal thing too. I mean, probably would be okay, right? Because again, it's an animal thing. Yeah. Only if
well,
it's
that's
raw.
the next step, right?
That's the next step. Then it's like,
I don't see. So I only see 6 products:
Okay, I might be wrong.
beef organs, blood builder.
Fire
Which-
starter.
What about, guys, what about the iron content? What about all that? Because that's such a big topic too in Ray's work, right? It's like not overloading with iron. I haven't heard him say anything about iron,
Oh, yeah, that's another problem.
right? So tell me more about that problem, Kyle.
I'm sorry, he's selling a product called histamine.
Bro, it's good for you.
Yeah, that's a big thing in the carnivore community, developing or having a histamine intolerance, which again is in this complex biochemical web of hormones that Ray always talks about.
Well, explain that to me. I don't understand. What do you mean? Like he's selling something with histamine in it, or what?
Oh, it's a bunch of glands and liver.
Oh, so it's the same
So-
shit.
I guess the idea is histamine and it's just the product is called histamine and immune.
Okay.
Proper histamine metabolism. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, come on, guys. We have to have a.
Kyle's like,
It just like it hurts my like I understand. I don't actually have a problem with like marketing and stuff, and like if people are not that smart and you have to just be like, here, buy the good for you product, and people are like, oh yeah, I'll get the good for you product. But then there's all these different tiers of interaction where like then that person goes on to talk to an expert on a thing, and then that's for like the higher brow audience, and then they have a book. But some of the stuff they talk about is as dumb as the names of these products. Like when he was talking to Joe, and it's like, so I don't know. It just looks like he just knew what people wanted to buy, and he just like got this thing going.
Yeah, well, what
And
people want to hear too.
I'm not even mad about it. It's just like it's so weird. I'm looking at it. It's like I'm like, wow, that font. Like, yes, I've seen that before on the jars. Like,
Mhm.
I see bone. There's like hipster bone broth companies that sell it in glass,
Mhm.
and it's got the same thing. It's got like the animal, and it's got like a cool font, like embossed, old, like letters that are like made 3-dimensional. I don't know. I just find it fascinating. I'm like, this is just this is a bunch of crap.
Well, the average person.
You're not his target audience, Kyle.
You have to talk about it, obviously.
I'm his trigger audience. It triggers me.
So iron. What would be some other bad shit that you wouldn't want to consume when you're consuming too much meat? For the person that doesn't know, for his audience, what would you tell them?
I think Kyle covered it. It's the phosphate, the
Mhm.
iron, the lack of calcium, which is like the counterpart to the phosphate.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's lots of benefits. So
Amino acid balance.
the amino acid balance, the glycine, the proline or whatever. But again, like from whatever the person was consuming to going over to Paul's point of view or whatever,
Mhm.
like the chances are they're likely to feel like $1 million, And so that's what's so like insidious about this is like feeling terrible, implementing foods you've never consumed before, feeling a lot better, and then like being sucked into this like cult like mentality, and
Right.
But again, as we talked about last time, it's very complex, and people like being parts of things, and like Kyle, when you were a libertarian, you probably identified with that as, and that's like a part of you. It's like extremely complex, and if anything, you can point your finger at the culture of like taking away these like kind of meaningful or the agency we have of steering us in these directions of trying to find meaning in our life, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you got to take a stance. So you're saying basically, if that same guy, if he went, although he did say he went vegan for a while, right? And I think he said it's been 2 years now that he's carnivore, which, like you said, it's like a girlfriend that you're still figuring out, and it is pretty fucking crazy that how much he's putting all of his eggs in one basket, right? It's just like, yeah, man.
And why is he an authority? Like,
right.
I'm just like, I just can't stand it. Like, I can't stand the structure of communication to people about this stuff, because if you just say things in a certain way and say it with confidence, like I've had people tell me before, like, oh, you're not clear enough on what you're saying. It's like, that's because I don't know the answer, and I'm telling you what I know, and I'm not just gonna bullshit it. And it's like,
you're far down on the Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah. And they're literally asking me, like, just
say
tell me what I want to hear.
But you're espousing like a very evolved, a mature point of view, and so again, that just comes. I understand. I don't disagree with you, but it's like that's not somebody who's. We kind of talked about this last time too, Leo. I think like sick people want immediate answers. They want certitude. They want authority. Yes. And so if you've gone through it, you feel a lot better, and you realize how complex things are. That is not attractive to somebody that's in like kind of a desperate situation, And so, I don't know what the right answer is. I'm as turned off, and the way that people portray themselves, like kind of as the authority, is like disgusting and kind of gross to me. But if you ask Danny 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, that would have been like maybe that would have been really appealing,
Yeah, Kyle called it strong horses last time in our podcast. Yeah, nobody wants to follow the guy that's just like, eat some of this and some of that and some of this and some of that. It's like, yeah.
Well, it's just, he's particularly egregious because if he was a vegan 2 years ago, I'm just saying, like, the people that get risen up or whatever, like if it was somebody like Mark Sisson who's been around forever, and if he's like still kind of healthy and he's kind of older now, it's like, okay, fine. He's got like street credentials. He's been around for a while.
Right.
I can understand that, but it's like this guy that just comes out of nowhere and like takes a bunch of. The first time I saw this was with Dave Asprey. I started seeing in like 2013. I was kind of late to it, but I saw the Facebook ads and stuff, and I was in grad school, and I was like, this is dumb. And then he just exploded, and everybody's like, oh, biohacking and like fungus-free coffee or whatever.
Do you put butter in your coffee, man? Because if you don't, you're really missing out, man. It really keeps the caffeine flow slow and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and that was the first time I realized, like, oh my God. Like, these people are just, it's like they're going to the bank and they're like, all right, I need a loan for like $1 million. And it's like, what's your business plan? And it's like, look. And they just point to like 10 internet forums and they're like, I'm going to take all of this crap that people just talk about on the internet that's going to be mainstream in 2 years, and I'm going to have products for like millions of people.
Yep. Have you seen him lately, Dave Asprey? He looks like shit, man.
He's always looked bad. That's what killed me about it. He was in his early 40s. What, in like 2013? I guess he would have been.
I think he's 47 now. I think.
So he was 40.
Maybe he's in his early 40s.
About
actually,
7 years ago.
He looks terrible. I don't know, but he looks fucking awful.
All right. So you know what? Let's not speculate. Dave Asprey.
But see, people like him and Paul really did a good job, because at the end he kind of goes like, well, I'm doing this because I want the people in the world to feel better, and I want my parents to feel better. And it's like when somebody says that, you really appeal to other people, and people, don't catch on to the bullshit sometimes. And then it's tricky business, man.
He's 46 right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Googling Dave Asprey 20. Okay, so 2013. All I'm saying is he is 10 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 years ago, he was 3 years older than me. And in 3 years, there's no way I'm going to look like the way Dave Asprey did in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's all I have to say about that.
That's all I got to say about that.
I mean, I think he's somebody that built his own prison, with his whole lifestyle. And also,
is it a cryogenic?
Yeah, and also he kind of did a Paul Saladino type of thing where I think the people that get really popular do media rounds. They go talk to they do tons of podcasts. They go to different places and they fly a bunch like that. Considering what is in those cabins of flights and stuff that has to be a toxic lifestyle to do, So.
Well, it's also probably becoming like that echo chamber, like we talked about, like living in California, where it's just they're flying around meeting all these other biohackers, and all these other biohackers have the same fucking opinion as them, and so they're just buying into it, and there's nobody questioning them at all whatsoever.
There was a funny video on Dave's Facebook page where I think it was Dr. Delgado, who's like a long-term vegan, was analyzing Dave's blood live on the spot. and Delgado was like, "Whoa, your blood looks really bad. Has tons of markers of oxidative stress." And every time Delgado would say something looked bad, Dave would say, "Oh, I was in a hotel a month ago and I got exposed to mold," or I drank red wine last. He had just.
He had an answer for everything, and he knew exactly where to pinpoint it, right? Yeah. It's the little piece.
Again, I don't think life is easy. I think everybody's being harmed all the time, but I just thought it was funny that this Dr. Delgado actually looks pretty good for being a vegan for so long.
So another thing, which you were talking about, markers of health and stuff. So another thing that Paul brought up on Rogan's podcast was continuous glucose monitors, and he said that's the thing that really tells you everything about your metabolic health. What do you guys think of those glucose monitors, the continuous ones? You just kind of, you just clip them on the back of your arm, yada, yada, and that tells you everything.
One, that's going to be a terrifying technology. That, I think, is going to be really insidious in the future. I was just watching something. Their technocratic future. I shouldn't go into this. Anyways,
go for it, man.
I'll derail the show. I couldn't think it. They're usually framing it in the idea that lower is better, and so that I think is bankrupt and has no validity. If anything, the lower means
right. And also what we talked about with Dominic D'Agostino guys, right? It's if you haven't had carbs in a long time and then you have some, of course you're gonna have this huge reaction to them, right? But what does that really tell you? I don't know what that tells me. You know what I'm saying? If I never eat carbs, or let's say for a certain amount of time and my blood glucose is low and steady, right? And then I eat, a cookie and it just goes crazy. It's yeah.
High free fatty acids blocking your use of glucose probably.
Right, but this doesn't really tell me anything, does it? It just tells me that, I probably shouldn't be eating a cookie, but I don't know, it's kind of a useless thing. But again, in the biohacking and the Ben Greenfield fitness kind of guys, it's a really popular technology. Kyle, what are your thoughts on it?
Are they expecting to eat a bunch of sugar after being on a low carb diet and have their blood sugar not go up?
Exactly.
Is that what they're trying?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You might have thought that drinking this 16-ounce thing of Coca-Cola wouldn't raise my blood sugar because I have such a healthy metabolism on a low carb diet.
Right.
But even my bulletproof metabolism is destroyed with a blood glucose spike by this, however many grams of sugar. It's everything they're saying is wrong. Like
Right.
it's
I just really want to like.
it's exquisitely incorrect.
Yes. I'm happy you. Like, I really want to talk about this because, like I said, because if you hire a health coach or whatever, any of these, this is like the technology that they're using to measure everything. They're just like, and that's Paul's again. It's directly from him. He said that's really the thing that tells you a lot about your metabolic health. And
Well, it's like, why is your blood sugar going up? Like,
Mhm.
really, the only time that I would think it would be bad for your
Mhm.
blood sugar to be going up is if your fasting glucose is going up over time,
Mhm.
like how low carbers have.
right.
Like that's the one example of it be, or actual untreated diabetics, if they have a meal and their blood sugar doesn't go down for like 3 hours
Mhm.
postprandial, that is bad. And either they're type 1 diabetic and they're not taking insulin, or they're extremely insulin resistant because of things that have nothing, because of things other than sugar in their system blocking the metabolism, the use of the glucose and the disposal of it.
Mhm.
None of those things are mentioned or addressed. It's just they just have this thing like your blood sugar being high is bad.
Right.
But really, if you are a normal person with a healthy metabolism and you drink a soda, your blood sugar will go up and then go back down. And if you drink another one, the same thing will happen. And that's good.
Mhm.
And actually, the low carb people, it'll probably go up more and stay elevated longer because they have, when they're introducing the soda or whatever they're eating, they probably have a bunch of free fatty acids in their system that's going to compete.
Mhm.
So like everything about their premise is wrong.
Right. So just to break it down again, like if you haven't been having carbs for a long time, right, you have higher levels of free fatty acids in your blood. Am I on point? And if you and you start trying to have carbs, like,
Or if you're starving.
or if you're or
Either
fasting, right, starving. um, so having a soda and you're having your blood sugar spike like crazy, it's not surprising. But if you're a person that's not a low carb where you eat carbs consistently and you have some carbs, you're not going to have that spike, but you will have a spike, right? Because that's just what happens. And then your blood sugar goes down again. And yeah, it's crazy but that's what, like I said, in the whatever, the mainstream kind of fitness or health coaching places, that's what's like really being looked at. Like, oh, well, because it used to be, just the blood dripper thing, and then now it's like the continuous one because you need it. Because trust me, we get 24-hour, fucking access to your blood, and it's really important. I don't think that it is.
I think Kyle's right. It's like having a map of New York and Paris. It's like leading this person to like every wrong conclusion and looking at it through like low carb goggles. And so, and I think you said it on our 2016 really popular podcast that got tons of downvotes. And it was like like when you're going low carb, you're not solving your like so-called insulin resistance. You're just kind of it's like going to the gym and you having weak legs or something and just like not working them out and saying, "Oh, I've solved my weak leg problem,"
Right.
So yeah, but the part about that's strange is they'll say, "Well, carbohydrates are inherently toxic," and so that's like, okay, how are you going to counter that belief? Like it's a bit like a big system.
Yeah, guys. Well, now here's a question for you, like. Because, I don't know how your experience, I never really, I guess, asked either of you guys, like, in detail how it was when you initially started to eat carbohydrates from coming from a low-carb diet. Like, when I did that, I mean, and I'd have carbohydrates, I'd definitely feel like fucking, not that great. I'd feel this, like, spike of energy. And over time, of course, it got better. So, like, do you think it's a sign, though, of, like, something not being right when somebody eats, just a carbohydrate meal and they feel awful right after it?
I feel like the majority of the people that I talk to that have that problem, they have something going on in their intestine. Like the people that are super sensitive and say like really wild stuff happens to them when they eat some kind of carbohydrate, like it makes me think they have some kind of overgrowth or bacteria in their intestine.
Yeah, my personal experience was, so I entered graduate school in 2011, the fall of 2011, as a mostly raw carnivore person. Like I would bring a glass lock container with raw meat in it in like my backpack to eat. And
you're doing it wrong.
And then I started studying and doing just different things like grading papers and stuff, because I was also a teaching assistant during that time. For whatever reason, I really liked the vibe at the Barnes and Noble Starbucks cafe in this town. There was a couple towns over. Like actual Starbucks is too busy for me to do work, but the Barnes and Noble Starbucks is kind of like a dying franchise.
Yeah.
And the people watching is better there because it's like people with books. I don't know. I just really loved the vibe. And I would go there and I would not bring a glass lock container of raw meat because I just like wasn't not ballsy enough to do that in a place like that. And so I would get like a coffee drink, and one of those crappy like cheese stuffed pretzels.
Okay.
And I started for the first time ever, because places like that, a lot of times when they have service employees working, it's a little too cold because they're moving around a lot. So it's comfortable for them. So if you're sitting reading a book, an hour later, your like hands are like slow and you realize like the cold has gotten in, because it's just like 3 degrees less than you'd like it to be if you're not moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I was doing a low-carb diet, and I was fasting because I didn't bring any food. And I started noticing, I don't know if I had just hit that age where I just couldn't do it anymore. This is my late 20s, or, graduate school, it's stressful, whatever. Or maybe I hadn't gone that long without eating. Of course, I was studying, so I was probably using a lot of sugar in my brain. All of that together, I started getting really cold in this Barnes & Noble Starbucks and feeling irritated and crappy. And when I would go get one of their crappy food items like cheddar broccoli soup and a stuffed pretzel, which is just like totally like reheated processed food, probably a ton of PUFA, maybe some natural cheese in there with cheese product, who knows. But I would feel like warm after that and better. And that was right around the time I started reading Ray Peat stuff. And I was basically like, wow, that's really weird, because I don't feel, when I was doing the carnivore thing, this is true that you feel steady all day.
Right.
But if you feel crappy, and then you have a carnivore meal, you feel the same. Like it doesn't actually bring you up, because it doesn't raise your blood sugar or anything. Actually, one time I was teaching a physiology class and we were doing blood glucose, and the students had to take their blood glucose over like the 3-hour lab. And some of them, we'd split them up. Some of them would drink one of those glucose testing beverages. It's like 100 grams of glucose. Mm-hmm. And a group would drink like half of it, and a third group wouldn't take anything. And they would take 4 glucose readings every like 45 minutes or something. Mm-hmm. And I take mine as well, and I took mine after eating one of my raw meat meals, and it was like 60 something.
That's low,
because I just ate a bunch of amino acids that are insulin what's it called when it
insulinogenic?
Yeah, insulinogenic. Mm-hmm. With no carbohydrate. So it just it was like funny because I was learning this stuff. I was kind of like, oh, this Ray Peat thing's interesting. Because like me, I can't, if something's interesting, even if I'm like, I hate this, because I'm like, I have to keep going back, so I'm reading it. I'm like, it's like, he says this thing about cholesterol I like, but then he says, something else. Mm-hmm. And then I started having that experience at the Barnes and Noble with their shitty food that had carbs in it, but that made me feel like warm and good and like put me in a good mood while I'm doing, work it's like stressful and it's hard to do and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I had that experience where it's like, I mean, if I had kept doing that diet, it's likely that if I just like ate enough meat at the wrong time, I would actually like get dizzy. You know what I mean? Like I was hitting that blood glucose level because I was probably really insulin sensitive at the time, and doing this diet where I'm like slamming myself with insulin and no glucose. And it was really interesting to see that, because I was like, oh, my blood glucose is going to be, it's going to be like 80. It's going to be like whatever the number is supposed to be good on the stupid medical textbooks. Mm-hmm. And it was like really low.
It was really low. So, like working with clients, I do have clients that, for example, that's why I think a lot of people switch over to the carnivore diet. Partly, it's not only all this other stuff. It's like you said, when they eat oatmeal for breakfast, and I've had that experience too. Like in an hour, I'm fucking hungry, and I don't feel great. I want to eat something more. But then when they eat, whatever, beef and cashews for breakfast, they definitely have that like 3-4 hour steady window of like feeling good. How come? But then there's other people that like I'm saying like they'll eat some oatmeal and if they feel the same, they feel really good for a few hours. Do you think something is messed up with either of their kind of metabolisms?
Danny, do you want to go on that?
I don't fully understand the question. Like the feeling good is always subjective, It's like
they don't get hungry. They don't get hungry. They have steady energy, when they eat. That's why a lot of people are switching over to the carnivore diet.
That was my experience.
They eat a big meal of meat and whatever, even meat and carbs or something, vegetables, meat and vegetables, right? They feel good for 3-4 hours. Now, versus if I just gave them some fruit or they had some oatmeal, they would just, pure carbohydrate stuff, they get hungry in an hour and they crash.
Yeah, possibly the liver isn't working that great storing sugar, and so the reliance on the fatty acid metabolism maybe is a steadier type of energy, and also the cortisol and adrenaline, it probably feels pretty good for a lot of people. I have like 2 references I spam everywhere, but it's one's from Hans Selye and the other one's from Constance R. Martin, and they both say identical things, that the running on adrenaline and cortisol feels euphoric for at least a certain time, and then followed by psychic depression or suicidal tendencies. And so I don't know if you could say specifically what that is for each person, but
right. Well, it was just a thing that, like I said, it even happened to me where I'd meet guys that they'd eat oatmeal and some fruit for like a tiny amount, or just a regular sized meal. And
that's the problem.
So you think they're just not eating enough, you think probably, huh?
Yeah. And like, if they're more hungry in the morning, like I actually don't feel that hungry in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I used to skip breakfast when I was on the carnivore thing, and I didn't have that much of an issue with it. And when I started eating, more like a 3 meals per day and adding carbs back in and everything, sometimes I just skip breakfast on accident because I actually don't get. But some people like feel like they have to eat in the morning. I mean, if somebody feels like they have to eat in the morning, it's like 2 meals or whatever, then just like, what's the problem?
Right. Well, I'm not saying that, I'm like I said, it's just more so that some people eat carbs for breakfast, they feel fine, or even lunch, whatever, they feel fine. And other people, when they eat that, and I was like that myself, I'd get hungry in an hour and I'd feel this crash. But when I would eat meat with something else, I'd feel much better. But then I started thinking that, yeah, tell me, Danny.
I'm going to rain on everybody's parade. I actually have one other Skype. And so I planned this very poorly. And so,
my brother. It's so cool. You got to go now right now?
Yeah, probably like 10 minits or so. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just didn't plan.
Don't worry, brother. It's all good. We're just we'll just go, just sign off whenever you got to go. All right? No problem.
Okay. At 5 after, I'll bail.
Perfect.
Hold down the fort.
Hold down the fort. All right. My question was, again, here's what I'm getting at. It seems like to me now that a healthier guy, a person who's like I think is healthier, they can have a meal of carbohydrate and feel fine for a couple hours. Just like a person that can't have that meal because they feel this crash. They need some sort of meat, because that's why I think that's one big reason that definitely a lot of people are switching over to the carnivore side, because they say, you eat carbs and you have this crash. And it sounds like to me that, maybe your liver is not storing enough glycogen. Maybe you're just not really good at processing those carbohydrates. That's my thinking process now.
Or like Kyle said, they're not eating enough carbohydrate just in general.
I mean, they should be eating meat too. Like you shouldn't just have a thing of oatmeal and like, a few grams of protein in like a milk or something. You know what I mean? Like it's not surprising if somebody had, less than 20 grams of protein in their breakfast, and that like a reasonable amount of carbs and a little bit of fat, and that's not satiating for a long time. That doesn't really strike me as like a metabolic issue. It's just like, yeah, I mean, it's true that fat and protein are part of the satiety system, and they keep you sated longer, along with, carbohydrates. Like carbohydrates definitely are like a quicker thing. And I guess people are just like, well, yeah, so that means it's bad. It's like, because like longer lasting fuels are better.
That's kind of the thought process with people. Yeah, it's like if I eat oatmeal, I'm hungry in 2 hours, but if I eat a giant steak, I'm hungry in 5 hours. So that must be better. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. that's part of why I wanted to do that video about the exercise substrates, you know, because I just wanted to make it clear that yes, the body can run its basic metabolic processes, you know, on fat, and it can do all these things, but like these nutrients, it's like there's this weird unnecessary dichotomy where it's like, okay, well, I decided that carbs are like, I can't eat more meat without cutting carbs to zero. It's like people have this, you know, binary choice, and then, you know, they just step over the gluconeogenesis thing and they kind of go, oh, I'm running on fat now, and they don't even know what their tissues are using.
Right.
Like, that's not that complicated. I mean, I specifically referenced every enzyme in every pathway
You did a very
to make sure
thorough job.
that nobody could say anything about it, you know, that it's incorrect or incomplete in any way. But basically the middle, more than 50% of that video is essentially just for reference. You could just skip over that for the most part, which I should have put timestamps. Maybe I still could. But the point is that, like, yeah, the body is this system where you eat different foods. They get stored in different tissues and they're used for different things. It's not, your body isn't this thing where it's like, well, today I shall use fat, or like today I shall use sugar, and then that's it. Like, people actually think that, and it's the people like Paul Saladino again. Like, yeah, he can't tell everybody everything, but if people are walking away, you know what it reminds me of? There was back in the aughts, there was some kind of survey of Americans, like, was Saddam Hussein involved in the 9/11 attacks? And a majority of Americans said yes. But nobody in the George W. Bush administration ever actually said that explicitly. They just hinted, they just would say, like, they would talk about 9/11 and then they would talk about the Iraq War and Saddam Hussein. And they know, like, those people know how to create connections without saying something.
I think you're right, but didn't Rumsfeld actually have a quote where he did, if not directly say it, like almost say it, and then he was on Meet the Press and they played it back to him and he was like, basically caught in a total lie.
I don't remember that. I mean, they definitely said, you know, they repeated the thing, like, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
They repeated that like 100 times.
It's in the Earl Morris documentary with him. It makes him look kind of stupid.
That's not hard. But my point is that these people should, like, if they're educating people and then the people think something incorrect that's actually bad for them, or like something basically incorrect, like just factually incorrect about how glucose works, you know, or about how your tissues, like how the liver works, use this or that, like, and they're listening to this person. It's like, dude, that's on this person. Like, they should explain this stuff so that somebody's not making this, like, they're letting them think, they're leading them to think these things for marketing purposes, just like a presidential administration will wink and nod that the person they want to bomb for some totally unrelated reason is the person that, like, knocked over your buildings.
On that note, I'm going to take off. Kyle, thank you.
Danny Roddy, DannyRoddy.com. Thanks for coming, brother. It was awesome.
Nice talking.
We'll do it again.
Again, if you need be, but always a pleasure, guys.
Pleasure is ours, brother. Appreciate
Be
it.
safe. Talk to you soon. Okay, bye, guys.
Peace. Kyle, you good? You staying on? You want to stay on? You want to chat a little more?
Yeah, I'll chat a little more. Like, do you have specific, because I feel like we went off on a lot of, like, I guess, bro tangents, you could call them.
Oh yeah. Do I have specific questions? No.
Yeah.
Well, I let you guys have it. You guys were really adamant about. I wanted to kind of chop with Kyle, with Paul, and yeah, I think it's just because you guys have been in that sphere for so long that it just pisses you off. That I get it.
Yeah. Well, at a certain point, like, when you see a pattern, like what I was saying about the thing with the Saddam Hussein and 9/11, if you're like 10 years old and even if you know that that's not true and a bunch of people think it, and you're like, oh man, it's so weird, like a bunch of people think this thing that's wrong, and then you grow up and you see how complex and how complicated lying can be, or I should say just being dishonest or misleading people.
Yeah.
So when I see gurus And, that's a bad term now, so nobody calls themselves that. But, somebody who is like presenting themselves as an authority figure, who is like making money on this, who is like really sensitive about their image, about it. Like they don't, they want to sort of have this aura. And you see them saying certain things and not saying other things, skipping over this topic, emphasizing this topic. And you've seen it before. It like triggers that kind of spider sense of like, oh, okay, like he's doing the thing.
Right.
Which is kind of, unfortunately, it's like an inside. It's not something that makes as much sense maybe to somebody who's like first getting into this stuff. But
no, it takes time. It takes time to realize that, man, because it's so
like
complicated world.
Yeah, like what Danny said about if they start talking about CO2 in a certain kind of way, it's there's no way it's like, oh wow, he came to the same conclusions as Ray. It's just
he's just straight.
The chances of that are so small. Yeah, you just know. It's the same thing like if somebody just shows up, it's like, oh yeah, this person was they were in New York for a few months, and then in their next MMA fight, they were doing heel hooks. It's like, isn't that so weird? Like, it's like, oh, did they train with John Danaher at Renzo Gracie's? And it's like, no, I don't think so. I think they just decided to like add heel hooks.
No, like, man.
Like, if you know enough about the thing, you know where it's, you know what I mean, where it's coming from.
Right. Music is the same way. I get you, man. Well, you brought up heel hooks. So like. I want to let's talk about exercise because I know you're a purple belt, right? You said in BJJ.
Yeah.
So like, in the Ray Peart world, you don't really hear Ray mention a lot of things about exercise at all. And actually, the few times that I've it's sort of like he doesn't sound like he's a fan of exercise in general.
No. Yeah, that's one of my criticisms of Ray is that it seems like he has an overarching framework of life as something like the purpose is to minimize stress.
Right.
And I don't like, I see that as a means to accomplishing your ends in your life. Like you should minimize stress so that you can like insert, like blank, not you should minimize your stress so that you can continue to minimize your stress.
Just completely get rid of it. Right. Yeah.
Right. Like you shouldn't be like, sort of like bubble boy mentality. Like if you could somehow live in a bubble where it like has higher CO2 and you have like a glucose drip all the time and like whatever, like a sort of a caricature of like all the Ray Peat stuff just all in one bubble.
You just have
that to me would
coming out of the teat straight into your mouth.
Yeah, that would be creepy.
Yeah. So
exercise is part of that because exercise is stressful.
Right. Now do you think there's like levels? Well, of course there's levels to it, but I'm saying like, do you think, because when you start talking about exercise with like the Paul Saladino types, and they did talk about saunas and stuff on the podcast, there's this view of like exercise, like, it induces stress, but then that stress makes you stronger, and then when something like that stressful happens, so it's like the idea being that it's like this stress makes you stronger. I don't know how much. Do you agree with that kind of thought process?
Well, the problem is the word stress has a bunch of different connotations. Like there are ways that people use the word stress to mean purely a negative thing. And then there's a more, say, technical definition. Like, for example, if you're talking about a material, like a building material, it can take this much shear stress or strain, know? So you're just talking about it in a technical, like this thing will break or whatever material failure at this poundage or whatever. And then, that technical definition is brought over into like the Hans Selye stuff when he talks about stress and his experiments where he would say strap down a rodent, like a rat or a mouse, and they would try to get away and they couldn't. And that would cause stress, or like you can throw them in a, like a bucket of water and make them swim for a while or else they drown, right? That's like a stress. There's a lot of different things that people do with rodents to induce stress and to like see how they cope with it and to, give them drugs, give them different diets, see how that changes, like what happens to them. So it depends what you're talking about. I mean, it's literally stressful on your muscles to produce force, at least at a certain level. Like You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Like your cortisol does go up when you exercise, right? And they used to even do cortisol blockers back in the day. All the fitness guys used to do that because the thought process was, or no, they used to give you cortisol pills. My bad. At the end to raise your cortisol even more to kind of induce that, to induce that kind of response. The thinking being that you're gonna tear down your muscle even more and it'll grow even more, better.
right. But even beyond that, even beyond like a hard workout where you have stressed your whole body,
Mhm.
just like bending pressure against your muscles and also against your bones, like it does things, reactions where, like if you are repeatedly, think of it this way: when people are in space stations, and they
Mhm.
don't have the stress of gravity to the same amount on their body,
Mhm.
their muscles and bones and other systems, but just to keep it simple, just talking about this, change.
Right.
So
They get kind of all crippled up when they go back to Earth. They're all they need time because they're not as strong as they're walking, and
right.
their
So the
bone mass
question
is smaller.
is gravity stress? You know what I mean? So you could
Mhm.
call gravity stress. You could call the lack of gravity stress, but these people have negative medical outcomes. So is the lack of gravity stress?
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense because gravity literally produces a stress force,
Mhm.
like if on the body constantly.
Mhm.
Your weight, and so I would think of it as like a biologically appropriate stress. I mean, it's just the word stress. It's a word people are like, oh, I'm so stressed out. This is so stressful. It's
Right.
like a crappy word for that.
It can mean a lot of things too. But
Yeah.
so with that thinking, like you said, that you brought up gravity. With that thinking, then it seems like your body does need a certain amount of that quote unquote stress, meaning something that kind of forces physiological change, I guess. So,
Mhm.
but then, so maybe the question is how much of that and at what appropriate times is it needed, right? Because it
Right.
probably too much. Like everybody knows overtraining, right? You're
Mhm.
overtraining, and you lose muscle mass, or you start feeling like shit. You have a bad mood, blah blah blah. I mean, that's definitely a real thing. Um,
Yeah.
but then so and when it comes to like saunas and stuff like that, have you looked into the research of stuff like that and cryo chambers and all these
Actually,
things?
no.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Come on,
the
brother.
only thing I really looked into was, when we were talking about Wim Hof, and I had that whole thing about how he has a certain kind of look to him
Oh
that to
yeah,
me just seems like, what's it called? Is it angiogenesis, or when you make more blood vessels?
alcoholics knows you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Well, right, that's what it is, right? Like that's like a
Yeah.
term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody got like totally addicted to whether it's Wim Hof method or some other attempt at hormetic
Mm-hmm.
therapy, that they would like cause those kinds of symptoms, or get even insulin resistance, like from
Mm-hmm.
sort of a chronic elevated cortisol and growth hormone and the other things that creep up when you have a constant stress level,
It's like those.
or a repetitive.
Mm-hmm. It's like those 100-mile racers, motherfuckers, right? Or the 200
Mhm.
Bigfoot Moab race people, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. Probably fair to say, right? That's a little bit too much stress for the body, and especially to do it regularly or once a year, even twice a year. Like, I don't know. It seems like you're digging so deep. I don't know. It again goes back to that obsession that we have of like, proving yourself. Like, yeah, I could do it, or like, I can eat the raw thymus gland, or I can fucking right. Like the same thing. I can run 200 miles. Like, I mean, I guess you can. I don't know if you should, but
Well, I think that's cool. I think it's fine if people want to do that.
mm,
um, the only thing I have a problem with is people conflating that with exercise for health benefits. Like when somebody says, "Oh, that long distance runner, he must be so healthy," because it's like
yeah,
they'll have an idea like exercise is healthy. So if this guy exercises more than everybody else, he's more, but it's not,
right, right. I don't know. So how often do you exercise yourself, man?
Well, like maybe 3 or 4 times a week.
It's
Probably more like
like a good
3.
average schedule. Yeah, man, because that's exactly what's happening. Is like people, they run 5 miles, they run 10 miles, and then they think, 30 miles is good, and they start doing 50 milers. And I've been there too when I was especially also low carb. Honestly, like I felt Good. I think that was my probably wall that I hit, where I would, I'd work, I'd, eat a low carb meal, and then I'd go and exercise at 10 p.m. and be fine, and then go to bed, and did that for a while. But definitely, after a while, I couldn't do that. I would get so fucking, I just feel drained, man.
Yeah, my wall was back when I was in grad school, like I was saying, and I was still doing the low carb thing and the raw meat.
Mm-hmm.
I had Tuesdays off. I didn't have any classes or I didn't teach anything. And so for a semester, I had Tuesdays off, and the MMA gym I was at the time had Tuesday morning classes. And so I would do an hour Muay Thai and an hour Jiu-Jitsu, just fasted. Like I would go in either 9 or 10 a.m. The one class would start, hour Muay Thai, and then whatever. And then I would come home, and I would just went too deep into the liver, and I would get a migraine every week. I would come home and eat my low carb meal, but it was too late. Like I had just gone too far. And in a workout like, Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu, you can't not work out hard. Because you know what I mean? Like you're doing warm-up exercises, then you're drilling, then you're like sparring, and you can't just like flub it when you're training with other people, because you kind of have to keep up with their intensity level to a certain degree. So yeah, I just kept going and having this, like, where basically I couldn't get anything done on Tuesday, even though it was my day off. I was like, oh, it sounds awesome, where it's like, oh, I have a day off in the middle of the week. I get an early workout, come home, eat, take a shower, and then I have the whole rest of the day to like grade papers or catch up on
and you were just wiped.
Well, I would feel a headache start like after I ate. And it didn't matter how much meat I ate, or if I took a really hot shower, or like just anything you try to do to stop a headache when it starts, it was going to happen. Like it was this predestined headache, and I would feel like crap until the next day.
And you never had the thought to have some carbs. Back then you weren't thinking about it.
That is absolutely correct. And that doesn't happen anymore. Like if I work out for 2 hours, I can actually work out I did that today. I went in and trained with a guy. We just like drilled and stuff, and then rolled for like 3 hours, and I didn't eat anything. I showed up at 11 a.m. fasted, and I left at like 2:30 or even later. And I got home, and on the way home, I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts and got like a large iced coffee with cream and sugar. Drank that, took a shower, drank a protein thing, and then ate a meal, all with carbs, and I don't have a headache right now.
So do you think? We talked a little bit about with Danny about the fasting thing. I mean, do you think there's some sort of you do that just accidentally, just because you don't feel hungry, so you just go with it? I mean, do you think there's any benefit in those time restricted windows that they give nowadays, that they're saying 16 hours, 20 hours, and of course, just like with exercise, there's like guys that start with 12 hours and 16 hours, and they do a day or two of fasting or whatever, then it becomes all these crazy fads that people are doing.
I just do it because if I'm gonna train before noon, it's just easier for me to do that rather than time eating something and just be totally sure that like my stomach is not going to feel weird like having somebody like knee on belly me like
I see.
Like so that's the only reason I do that. If I was meeting the guy at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. or something like that, I would have eaten breakfast. So it's more of a timing thing. Like scientifically speaking, it's true that you produce growth hormone, and people just think it's, again, because it's just called growth hormone, they're like, oh, that must be good, and it's like, right. no, it's like causes insulin resistance.
Yeah,
like people that abuse growth hormone get like type 2 diabetes eventually.
Bodybuilders, very common in them. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily a good idea to elevate that all the time. And then, of course, things like autophagy. Again, they're like, oh, this is it's good.
Big word. Let's talk about that. Yeah, autophagy, right? It's like exactly like you said. Now is it the same thing like with gluconeogenesis? Is autophagy constantly happening all the time in your body? Isn't that what's going on? Right. Yeah. So then I think most people are just not aware of that, honestly, dude. I think they think that autophagy is something only happens when you're not eating. Only when you're not eating, you know what I mean? Like when you're sleeping and in between meals. No, seriously, because again,
because they're told that.
Right. So there you go.
Or they're not told that. They're told it gets turned on from fasting. They're
Mhm.
not told it gets turned up,
Yeah.
and it's different. One thing is more honest than the other.
Mm.
But so my theory, I actually haven't looked into this too much, but I wouldn't be surprised if the increase in protein breakdown, and because that's the main thing, is that it's just older proteins get degraded and recycled faster
Mhm.
in those states, and it's like, okay, so you're telling me you're not eating and your body turns up recycling sort of the less important older things that are going to get recycled eventually anyway.
Mhm.
It does it sooner and more.
Mhm.
Doesn't that just scream out at you as like a mechanism for making sure that there's an amino acid supply, right? So it's like, okay, your body needs a certain amount of amino acids
Mhm.
and sugars and all kinds of things all the time just to keep your heart beating and your brain functioning. Like, you have to be synthesizing proteins in different tissues to some level all the time,
Right.
whether you're asleep, whether you're knocked out on anesthesia. Like, the living state is, a dynamic state. So when you stop eating, your body doesn't know that you're doing this cool hip thing called fasting. It's just like, oh, raw material X, Y, Z stopped coming in. So I'm going to upregulate proteins that break down less important proteins to make sure there's a steady supply of those things, because it doesn't know. Your body is not aware. It's like, oh, he's doing the Paul Saladino eating window. It's like your body's just going to do these things. Again, why I think it's important to compare these things to starvation, because your body doesn't have that kind of intentionality. It has these stop gaps, things to make sure your blood doesn't get too high or too low in pH.
Mhm.
And like, oh, I'm trying to do an alkaline diet. I want to alkalinize my blood. And your body's just fighting tooth and nail, because it doesn't care what book you just read from some whack job about a weird diet. It
Things are
just
gonna
has
happen.
it has these set points all over your body and a constant monitoring system.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's just a real long explanation to say, I don't think there's anything magical about fasting induced autophagy.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it makes total sense that it would get turned up in fasting, because it's a way of getting raw material.
Right. Well, the other thing is with the fasting, it's you're giving your body a break from digesting food, because I guess digesting food is somehow bad all the time because it's making your body work. I'm just giving you their thought process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though if you look at most animals in the wild, they feel like they constantly eating or looking for food. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it depends. I mean,
Okay, depending. Like bears and
a
shit
lot.
like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and there's different times of the year. Like bears are a big one,
Right.
where they have it's very cyclical,
Right.
relationships with feeding, and their metabolism changes drastically, because the hibernation, we can't do that. We can't, turn our metabolic rate down to a pretty small fraction of what it is, for a long time, and just lay in a cave or whatever.
Yeah.
But lions, they'll eat. I mean, they basically do the carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
They'll eat large meals.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have a smaller feeding window. Although I've definitely seen programs where they'll snack. If the pride eats an animal and there's some left over, they'll chill for a while, and then they'll kind of come over and snack a little bit in a more leisurely way.
That's true. And I've heard they've been adding honey to their diet lately.
Well, they go, you know what? Bees make this, and they're
not sugar, though.
they're animals.
Not sugar. That's toxic plague garbage. Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, because again, along with the continuous glucose monitors, if the average person who doesn't want to go to a regular MD that's just going to tell them some bullshit shit, if they go to a functional medical doctor or alternative medical doctor, any of those guys, the first thing they'll do is they'll put them on a low carb diet, and they'll restrict their time eating window, because again, it's all these things get turned on, and there's some, I mean, I understand, like, I get it, like, that idea, again, yeah, you're giving your body a break to kind of do all these other things instead of digesting food all the time, but yeah,
That's
right, and like, most
like we
people,
already have that.
right, and most people aren't, like, eating a giant meal before bed. Some people eat some food, right? You know what I'm saying? Because most people can't really sleep if they have, like, a Chipotle burrito at fucking 12 a.m. and go to bed, right? Like, you're gonna be like, oh, you know what I mean? You want to,
After, but people that are not like 16 or whatever,
right,
like,
right.
young people can generally do stuff like that, and
Sure,
whatever.
sure. But even, I don't know. Back then, I remember I moved to America at that time, and that was like, I ate a Chipotle burrito. I had to walk around my house. I couldn't fucking sleep at all. Seriously. I was like, Jesus.
Chipotle has like extra satiety factors in it.
Oh, dude. God. Because we lived in like a small town in Ohio, man, and it was just like there was nothing else there. It was like, at that time, it was like McDonald's and Chipotle, so good times.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's another example of like X amount of this one thing. Like there is an amount of growth hormone, say that you produce at night when you're fasted because you're sleeping, that is good. And is there any kind of slack or play around that where you could sort of experiment with, not eating a couple hours before bed? I don't know.
Right.
If somebody does something like that and they feel better, that's another thing that I always say, like, just to get this out of the way, like my little disclaimer, like, if people feel better doing something, I really am not too interested in counter signaling them. But if they're doing something that I think is really bad, all I say is just pay attention. Like, if you start feeling bad, don't pridefully just be like, well, maybe I need to just do it more. Like, I gave myself a 6-hour feeding window, and now I felt good for 3 months, and now I'm not so feeling good. I better make it 4 hours.
Right. It's just detox. I'll get there. I'll get through it.
Yeah. Just and also like get blood work, just get some numbers, take your temperature, like, you know what I mean? Try to be objective about your mood. You know what I mean? Like, ask people if you've been, just get information, and don't be afraid to be like, you know what, maybe this isn't the right thing, because ultimately most people will do that. Like most not necessarily the famous people, but if you go on forums and stuff for like low carb, most people, including Paul Saladino, will modify their diet at some point out of necessity. And whatever kind of justification, like if they still want to say they're in the movement, they're I'm still like a low carb person, or I'm still like, to sort of not have that cognitive dissonance. It's just better to just try to avoid that as much as possible. Just be like, okay, like this doesn't make me feel good, so
Well, like with Paul, he said his cholesterol is in the 500s. I don't know if it was 540 or something. I mean, but then again, right? But then you have that other side of like, oh well, the cholesterol is not the most important thing, and yeah, man.
Well, it's not. But if it's going up,
something is happening, right? That's what I was thinking too.
Glucose. Right? Yeah. If your numbers are going up for no reason, and you have this dietary change, also, and he had cold. Didn't he have what's it called?
Yeah, Danny said that. I'm not sure about it, but Danny said that he was having cold intolerance and living in San Diego. So, which is like, okay.
Yeah, so that combined with the cholesterol numbers going up is like primo hypothyroid symptoms, because if your thyroid's low, you're going to convert less cholesterol to pregnenolone.
I wonder what his fucking thyroid thing is. I don't know if he brought that up, so that'd be an interesting thing to see. So a lot of people who are having high cholesterol, not usually, but it could be something tied in with the thyroid there, like a hypothyroid state.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say most people whose cholesterol goes up, like in older age and stuff, it's a metabolic / thyroid issue. It's that their metabolism is slowing down, and so their body is just turning less of the cholesterol into steroids.
And then what about triglycerides? Because that's the other place that because that was one. He's like, my triglycerides are really low, and it's like, and that's again the mainstream thought process with with those type of people. It's like you want to have your triglycerides as low as possible.
Well, triglycerides are generally low when you're on a low carb. So triglycerides usually roll opposite free fatty acids. So like when you're not eating or when you're eating a really low carb diet, fatty acids are being liberated at a relatively constant rate from your adipocytes. And so your free fatty acids are pretty steadily high, you know? And whereas if you're eating a higher carbohydrate diet, your free fatty acids would only be high if you fast long enough that you start to make that switch where your glycogen's getting a little low, so you start getting the free fatty acids from the adipocytes, you know? Triglycerides go up after a meal, and usually after a mixed meal, because it's basically the fatty acids go into the adipocytes. So if you're using a lot of fatty acids as fuel, then you're going to be sending less of it. You're not going to have that big dump of fatty acids, because that's big dump of fatty acids into the adipocytes, because that's like a sort of insulin mediated process all at once. So like you eat a mixed meal of carbs and fat, and it's way more than you need at the time in your blood. So the glucose will go into, you know, your liver glycogen, into muscle glycogen and stuff like that, and stay in your blood for a little while. The fatty acids will get packaged into triglycerides and sent out to tissues. Muscle takes some of them, you know, liver will take some of them back, but it makes them. And then adipocytes will take a lot of them, depending on how much there are. And those processes are insulin dependent. Now, if you're eating a low carb diet, then the amount of triglycerides that's getting sent out and picked up by these tissues is going to be a little bit lower, just by the nature of that you're already using a lot of fatty acids. So like your liver will package less of those fatty acids into triglycerides to send out.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. But so is it sort of like with the glucose monitor kind of thing? I mean, it's just like if you're eating low carbs, you're just having less triglycerides, and if you're eating higher carbs, you're having more triglycerides? Is it sort of a measurement that doesn't necessarily mean that something bad is going on? It just comes from that view of like, you know, having your blood sugar spike is bad, more insulin is bad, right? It's all tied in with that sort of one point of view, huh?
Yeah, or like triglycerides or high triglycerides are bad. I have low triglycerides, so that means it's good.
It's good.
But it's like, why? I mean,
right.
Yeah, the reason you have to sort of explain like the different contexts for why this, you know,
it's important,
assay
man.
would be high.
Well, it's important that we talk about this seriously, because like I said, because I've paid hundreds of dollars to a lot of doctors for them to tell me those sort of typical things of like low triglycerides are good, you know, your blood glucose, you know, spiking after a meal, it's good because you're very sensitive. Now, I don't know, how would you what if somebody has been on a low carb diet and they switch over and they start having a lot more carbs and they start getting fat, like really easily, you know what I'm saying? Or they're very sensitive. How would you recommend they go about it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with adding carbohydrates back in slowly. Like I would never tell somebody, look, you know, you're on like a super low or zero carb diet, you should overnight switch to getting 60% of your calories from carbs. I would just be like, try a little bit of carbs, like, and see how you feel. Or even just, you know, whatever they're eating, like say they're eating under 100 grams a day. It's like, you know, make it 150 or like 200, you know, something like a, you know, not that big of an increase.
A bump.
Because a lot of people, if they've been doing this long enough, it takes a long time. I mean, it's possible they could never, like if somebody's, you know, gets on the carnivore diet when they're 22 and stays on it until they're 30 and then goes back to a normal diet, they've aged, you know? So like they might just go, it's not like they can necessarily just eat what they ate before and have the exact same effects anyway.
That's true.
And they've probably aged their system a little bit more than it would have otherwise with all the, you know, cortisol and stuff from the low carb diet. And, you know, if they were doing a lot of fasting and stuff. So you have to think of it like, again, and it's kind of tricky because people might accuse like what I'm saying of like, oh, well, if this is good, then it should be good in all contexts. You know, like there should be no negative effects of adding carbohydrates. And you know, that's a good point. But again, it's like they're specifically antagonizing the carbohydrate metabolism system. They're like attacking the insulin system with a low carb diet, you know, and with things like fasting, things that raise your cortisol and a bunch of other hormones that directly oppose the glucose metabolism system. So, you know, in that context, it's kind of like, you know, if somebody goes off of testosterone and then their testosterone drops, it's like, oh, it's not healthy to be on steroids all the time.
Okay, right. Right.
And if you go off of steroids, though, you're going to feel like crap because your natural production is down.
Right.
And there will be a significantly long recovery time. There's drugs that can help that along, and you know what it's, you know what that's about.
HCG.
So,
Louis Simmons.
so it's the same thing with carbs. Like, I mean, not the exact same thing, but you have altered your endocrinology such that it's not able to handle this macronutrient the way it was before this alteration. So I think it's good to go back before this alteration, right? But that's not something you can do overnight. And if you're older, you know, if you decide to do this in your like 40s or something, you know, and you'd be like super surprised, like, oh, I gained 10 pounds over like, you know, a few months because like now I'm eating a bunch of ice cream because like Ray Pete says ice. It's like,
do it slowly. not with ice cream. Probably wouldn't be your best choice.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, like, but you know, what happened to your blood sugar, you know, because some of these people with long-term low carb, their fasting blood sugar starts going up. It's like if you gain a little bit of fat, but those numbers start to improve, like your fasting blood sugar starts to go down. Obviously, something good's happening.
Yeah, and them getting fat. I mean, now would you say that like the typical like word everybody throws around is like insulin resistant? I mean, are they sort of insulin resistant? Do you think that that's how you would describe that state where they're, you know, they eat some carbs and like you said, they just get fat right away because they're so used to being on a low carb diet for so long?
Yeah, I don't think the insulin resistance necessarily directly causes them to gain weight. I think the effect of the insulin resistance is that their body perceives that it's appropriate to store more fat than it otherwise would perceive if you were less insulin resistant, because that's part of the whole system of like satiety and hunger and fat storage and metabolic rate is based on, you know, your brain, parts of your brain, and relaying back and forth around to the different relevant organs. Like, hey, what's the blood sugar look like right now? You know, and if you're insulin resistant, those signals, it'll basically seem like you have less, you know, available stuff than you do. So your body's like, oh, we better, you know, tweak down the metabolic rate a little bit because we're a little low on stuff, you know, sugars, whatever, you know, kind of rely a little bit more on fatty acids, maybe keep some, you know, store some more fat in adipocytes than we normally would if we felt replete with nutrients. Right.
Now with like, would you think it would be a good idea to, I mean, again, like you said, I understand. I'm just trying to throw out, you know, extreme cases here. Would it be a good idea to like try like a low fat diet, to go to like, you know, again, I'm not saying go from 100 grams to 400 grams of carbohydrates, but, you know, go from 100 grams to 200 grams and just kind of tweak down your fat and pay attention to that more, since you're trying to kind of reteach your body to, you know, use carbs more as your energy source there.
Yeah, that should accelerate the kind of switch back to using more carbs and less fat. The only issue that I've personally experienced, that I've seen some people experience, is like if you go really low fat, some people get like digestive problems or again like satiety problems and stuff. Like I feel kind of crappy. I've done a couple of low fat experiments. Like, you know, switching to skim milk for a while and eating just lean meat, you know.
Yeah, you definitely feel more hungry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel it's kind of hard to put my finger on it. Just kind of off, you know.
Yeah. So it seems like somewhere probably like a 30-30 kind of macro split or somewhere in that area. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying exactly 30% of each. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I would say for fat loss, like for not getting fat, I mean, have the fat a little bit lower.
That's the way you
maybe
go
even
about
have
it.
the protein a little bit higher. I mean, as long as you're getting enough glycine and stuff, it's really like gluconeogenesis at the level that you would be doing it if you just ate a little bit more protein than you needed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like calculated for your body weight or whatever and your activity level. That's not that big of a deal.
Okay. Now, if somebody wanted to get shredded, if you were somebody's coach, yeah, how would you go about that? How would you do it? So would you lower the fats more than the carbohydrate?
I would, because I think that's more healthy long term.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the immediate effectiveness of like, you know, being able to lose weight for some type of sporting reason, like lose body fat, I'm not really sure. I think there might be some people that do really well cutting carbs out a little bit for that kind of a purpose, like a short-term thing, or cutting out fat. I would, if I was advising an athlete that had to regularly, say it's a bodybuilder that has to get down to low body fat once in a while, you know, like several times a year, and they kind of say they stay around 10% and they have to get into the single digits like 3 times a year. I would be interested in them experimenting with, you know, lowering their calories, but doing like a low fat cut and do like a lower carb cut, maybe with like higher protein, moderate fat, and see what they feel better on.
So kind of try both.
Yeah, I would definitely not do I would never tell somebody to do like a 0 carb or a very, very low carb. But if somebody's an athlete, I mean, basically it's not healthy to be a bodybuilder.
Right. No,
so
surprise.
They're already doing something that's not healthy for a purpose other than health. So I wouldn't necessarily think it's the end of the world to use a less than optimal for like long-term health dietary solution for a short-term goal like that.
Well, yeah.
You know,
but not even, you know, average person though, that's not trying to be a bodybuilder. It's just a little fat, wants to lose 20 pounds for the summer to get into the James Bond trunks, the blue trunks.
Feeling attacked. You mean the Casino Royale trunks?
I don't know what you're talking about. Is that what
From
that
the
is?
beach scene? I mean, I'm a believer in eating a diet where the macronutrient balance makes you feel okay. Because if you don't do that, you're gonna crash at some point. And just having like maybe a modest caloric deficit.
Right. So calories would be the king. And but like you said, at the end of the day though, man, like if you're trying to cut some weight, lose some weight, like you're not going to feel great all the time, right? Because you're trying to lose weight.
Yeah. I mean, it depends how fast you want to do it. Like if you want to lose a pound of fat a week, which is about as much as you could do without really starving.
Really feeling like shit. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to, you'll feel a little crappy. Like the way that I can tell is if I have trouble sleeping. Like if I have trouble sleeping, it's like, okay, that was not enough calories.
Too much.
So like my personal little metric is like, I want to try to eat a little bit less than what I sort of calculate for my requirement, but be able to sleep easily. If I get in that zone, I feel like that's good. And if I only lose a third of a pound a week and I only lose like 5 pounds instead of 10 over some time period, whatever. Like I have to sleep. I have to feel good.
Right. And everybody has their thing. Now, what do you think about coconut oil? I saw somewhere Ray talking about he lost a bunch of weight when he was eating the same calories and added some coconut oil into his diet.
Yeah, he did say that. He said that he started adding them to rice or something.
Was that what it was? I just remember him saying that he was eating the same thing, like ice cream and stuff, and he added some coconut oil and he lost weight.
Yeah, Ray seems to be like a hyper responder to, like he's talked about stories in the past when he's taken thyroid and had like really, and there are people, like I have talked to other people who have either taken a substance like a drug or something like thyroid and had like a profound effect.
Yeah.
It's just that's not the average effect.
Right.
Right. So there's definitely some people, like if there's people that have high free fatty acids and they're storing a lot of PUFA and they start to take in coconut oil, because his explanation is that the coconut oil shorter chain, the medium chain fatty acids that dominate in coconut oil will compete going into the mitochondria with the longer chain unsaturated fatty acids, and will sort of beat them out and then sort of keep them out of the mitochondria because they're more oppositional to glucose metabolism, so they're more interactive with the Randle cycle. So if you're kind of using mixed fuels, you know, glucose and fatty acids, if you're using shorter chain saturated fatty acids, you will continue to use glucose at a higher level than if you're using longer chain fatty acids and unsaturated.
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, that's really important. Like you said about the hyper responders. Yeah, I've met people like that too, where there's just certain drugs, like you said, or caffeine or whatever. They're just so sensitive to it, and it does happen. But I guess, yeah, I don't think I'm one of them. Guess what I'm trying to say? I haven't lost all my weight. Although I do remember a guy, actually. One time I was working out in the gym, in a private gym here, and the fucking guy would buy a tub of coconut oil, like a tub, and he would eat it, the whole thing, throughout the day. And he would just sit there with a spoon and just fucking eat it, man. It was crazy, and he was shredded. But I don't know what else he was eating.
Did he have diarrhea?
I'm sure. I mean, how could you not? How could you not? Right? I mean, that's crazy, though, man.
I mean, he could be like a 1 in a million person who doesn't get that.
I don't know, man. But he was sort of that like borderline bodybuilder type guy. So you know what I'm saying? So with those guys, like if you go to the average bodybuilding gym, I mean, dude, go inside the bathroom. It's just like hazards, Chernobyl 2.0 in there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, seriously, you go in there and it's just like, and they don't care. That's what I'm saying. They don't, like you said, the unhealthy thing, they don't give a fuck. I mean, those guys, right. I mean, you know, they'll take like steroid tablets and they'll eat something like that which gives them diarrhea, and the tablets of steroids will be in their poop. That's like the famous stories you hear. But seriously,
so kind of like needles in the bed. It's like crackhead or bodybuilder.
I don't know.
You know, one other thing.
Yes.
Just to like get more meat, so to speak, into this carnivore discussion.
Yeah.
I did watch the lipivore thing. If you want to talk about that at all.
Let's talk about it, man. I totally forgot about it. And, you know, yeah. So Amber O'Hearn, right. I watched it too. So she put up this Amber O'Hearn, right? That's how you pronounce it? Or O'Hearn. Oh, O'Hearn. Okay, with an N. Sorry. She put up this video called Lipivore, right? Where basically she makes a big case for using more fat, right? And
yes.
And she's been low carb for how long now? She's been for a long time, right?
She's been carnivore. You know, I don't want to guess. I mean,
misquote,
probably about a decade.
Okay, but at first it was like low carb, and then it slowly turned into like complete carnivore, right? Where she doesn't eat any plants, and she's had.
When I met her, she was carnivore, and I met her in 2016. I think 2000, because she was at the Ancestral Health Symposiums 2016, 2017 that I was at. She was definitely at the 2017 one. I think she was at the 2016 one. So she's been carnivore, you know, self-identified carnivore for at least 3 years.
Right. So tell me about the video.
So first of all, she has, no, this is going to be a compliment.
Yeah. Oh, she's chill. Actually, she's chill. I like that about her too, actually.
Yeah, she's chill. Well, yeah, it's
from the video.
The lackadaisical presentation style is not my favorite part. My favorite part is she is actually trying to do like theoretical science.
Right.
Like she is putting something forth that is not a marketing scheme to sell supplements. It's not throwing red meat to the crowd. Again, like I said before, it's not just preaching to the choir. She's actually trying to come up with a novel explanation for what she thinks is good. It addresses questions that she sees in the community, that addresses questions of human anthropology, and she's trying to actually synthesize like different fields of science.
Yeah, and she brings up many topics, right, in that video. It's pretty good, actually. I thought so too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a million times more admirable of a thing than what somebody who goes on the Joe Rogan podcast and just says like carbs are bad, buy my book.
Right.
So, all right, but there's a few issues, and it's kind of the same thing. Like she had a paper that I was the reviewer on
Oh, wow.
2017 or 18 for the Journal of Evolutionary, the Ancestral Health Symposium related journal that Aaron Blaisdell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like forgetting these names because
It's all right.
like I just don't interact with these people. People that know will know. Anyway, I was asked to be the reviewer on a couple of papers for their journal, and I did it. And I forget what the other one was. I think it was also about low carb stuff, but the one was Amber talking about Inuit people and why is it that they're more resistant to ketosis than regular people.
Yes. We've talked about this with you a tad bit on the first podcast, but tell me more, man.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, like she was kind of trying to explain why the population that most people would agree most recently did a sort of carnivore thing with access to very high, because one of the issues is a lot of the megafauna in Europe and North America seem to have been hunted to extinction a while ago. Right. So, but when you get really north up there, the seals and of course people that hunt whales and all that kind of thing, like they still have access to very high fat animals. So anyway, the point is, if anybody is going to be your test case for a population that is still in the like ancestral ketosis metabolism, it would be these Inuit populations. And yet they have specific genetic mutations of the carnitine palmitoyl transferase system that make them more resistant to ketosis and rely more on gluconeogenesis, which makes sense because they're eating a lot of meat.
Right. So meaning they're not getting into ketosis like all these people are kind of advocating that you should be in, right? Because that's what's the healthy state. They're actually not in there that quickly, right? It takes a lot longer for them to get into that state.
Yeah, I mean, if they're in ketosis sometimes, they're in ketosis sometimes. But the point is, if ketosis was so great and this population was like, genetically evolved for this diet of a carnivore diet, why aren't they at least as susceptible to ketosis, if not more? Yeah, doesn't make sense. So, she had a bunch of different explanations for that, and she sort of questioned some of the data, and that's fine. But I think the point still stands that that's like a real dagger in the back of ketosis people, because it's like if you find this one population that's like your test case, and then they just literally have the opposite, like they have a mutation to avoid the physiological state that you think is
the optimum state, right? Yeah.
That's extremely inconvenient. So, and she is crafting this. The only problem I have with her theoretical thing is she's starting from the point of eating just animal foods is good, and then she tries to explain why it's good.
Right. It's like, there's no mention of the other things though, right? She doesn't really talk about, she doesn't, I don't hear her talk about anti-nutrients at least, or like whatever other things that people mention when they talk about other plant foods and shit.
Because she likes, actually, again, to her credit, she takes on the difficult questions. So people will say, like somebody like Paul Saladino would be like, oh, there's no elevated cortisol, there's no insulin resistance in a low carb diet, and she'd be like, there is, and it's good.
Oh, so right. So she just kind of says that might be the good thing, that optimal state again that you should be in, huh?
Yeah, she doesn't avoid the hard question. She doesn't like. She actually will say like, yes, people will be less sensitive to insulin when they're not eating carbohydrates and when they're eating a bunch of animal fat and protein. Like, and then she goes, and that's good. And then she'll kind of construct her reason for why that's good, which I think is super interesting. But I sent you two things, which I guess we can't show, but I'll sort of describe them.
I can show. I'm going to share my screen. You're talking about the which one do you want to bring up for the infant brains run on ketones or the fatness at birth? Which one you want me to? Is that
either one? They're actually both like sort of the same point.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen, and if you're not watching this, you'll be shit out of luck. We'll do our best to describe it.
Yeah.
Chosen. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm good. Is it no going? Can you see that? Can you see that?
Yes,
there
yes,
you go. Rock and
I
roll.
can.
Okay, rock and roll.
Awesome. So she has this hypothesis that humans aren't carnivores, like big cats or whatever, because we don't have the gluconeogenic ability of them. We don't do super well on a really high protein, low or zero carb, low fat diet. Cats do. It's also why cat pee smells so bad, because they can produce a lot of ammonia because they cleave the ammonia from the amino acids to get glucose equivalents out of them. So they have a more robust ammonia excretion system than we do, and their pee smells bad. So, worse than, human pee doesn't really smell bad.
God damn it, stop talking about pee, Kyle. You fucking pee fetishizer.
It's actually, Lyoto Machida. I heard.
Oh no, you brought up poor
good.
Lyoto. Oh, come on. Give the guy a break. God.
So, all right. So she had this one figure, fatness at birth versus, so she's making this, sorry, I went off track there. So humans are not carnivores, obviously.
Okay.
They're not herbivores, which is also obvious because we don't have the same length of digestive tract to like break down fiber, and we can't, get a lot of fiber, like certainly not like a cow, but even like a gorilla, they have the ability to get a lot more calories from fiber than we do. So she was saying, okay, because of that, she thinks that the human being is a fat eater, a fativore, a lipivore.
Okay.
And one of her pieces of evidence is that babies are much fatter at birth. And so she has this, and that's true. And she has this, this figure. The figure's kind of crappy though, because if you look, it's got human, and then it's got human on the right. So there's the one figure that has percentage fat at birth. So human babies are like 15% body fat at birth.
So at birth, humans are 15% body fat. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas a reindeer is like 5.
Okay.
And
a hamster being the smallest is like 2%.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
less.
like
Okay.
under 2%.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't have. Baboon is like 3%. A baboon is like more shredded than a bodybuilder.
Fucking A, bro. Trend.
Yeah, don't rip your arm off. So she says, this is a lot of evidence that human babies run on fat. And she also had a figure saying that adult humans have a much higher body fat percentage. Like an adult baboon is also like less than 1% body fat, or like a chimpanzee, whereas humans can't like you'd be dead if you were less than 1% body fat, like
right.
The most shredded bodybuilder in the world is like 4%. And
except
like
Rich Piana, he's 0% body fat.
Well, it is now.
Rest, you son of a bitch. Rest in peace.
Yes. Rip. So the problem is though, the two figures, so then there's the other one that says total O2 to brain. So she's basically saying, look, these ketones are feeding the baby and specifically the brain, because the human brain is way bigger percentage-wise than these other animals. The percent of total O2 that goes to the brain of human infants is way, way higher than these other animals. So, which makes total sense. But the problem is, there's really not a super great correlation here. Like, for some reason, baboon isn't even on the.
I was going to say there's none of the same animals, pretty much. Is there?
There's one same one, which is the guinea pig, which is the second fattest at birth and the second least O2 to brain. So it's like.
That's interesting.
This is actually not really saying what she. It is saying that humans have the most oxygen to their brain and is the fattest at birth by quite a large margin. But it is not saying that the other animals line up.
Because these are just different animals. On one, they're just calf.
Some of them are different, but some of them that are the same, they're not in the exact same position. So it's not like the third most fattest at birth is the third most oxygen to brain.
Yeah.
That's not what this says. There's a few that are in the same position.
There's like
consistent.
yeah. I just saw like elephant, and I saw like elephant seal, and I was like, oh, I was gonna say like, oh, there's the same one, and there was like elephant seal. I was like, oh, motherfucker. Anyway,
well, like rat is like in the middle on the right of O2 to brain, whereas it's close to the right, the extreme right side of percent fat at birth.
So it's kind of hard to draw a correlation there, then, huh? Besides humans, I guess.
Yeah, there's not. You bring up the other one, then.
Yes.
The ketones.
Boom.
So the other point is, the infant brain runs on ketones. So she makes this point, which is true, which human babies get into ketosis much easier than adult humans. Mm-hmm. And people draw a lot from that. They say, oh, that, our like basal thing to be is in ketosis. And, and people will say, and in that video of hers at the end, those two doctors talking about it, the Australian and the other guy.
Yes.
Or they were both Australian. Mm-hmm. They're saying, oh, there's like a lot of fat in breast milk. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of sugar too.
Right. That was one thing that I now remember that, yeah, where it was like there's a lot of fat, but there's also protein in there too, right? This is just like, I don't understand.
And sugar. There's a lot of lactose.
A lot of lactose, right.
Yeah. And so this table says ketone supply greater than 30% of late brain. So I guess that means late.
What do they mean by late brain?
Late. Does that mean like infant, late infant? So
okay.
I don't know exactly what age. And then 50% of neonatal, so before birth. Mm-hmm. Brain energy needs. So they're saying infant brains run on ketones. But what if you put glucose greater than 65% of late brain and about 50% of neonatal? You could say infant brains run on ketones, or on glucose.
Yeah.
This is just to say that 50%, the 50%, like, okay, that's fair. The other thing is, so yes, babies fall in ketosis very easily, mm-hmm. and they have a lot of body fat. Mm-hmm. This does not mean, here's another thing babies do. They have to be fed all the time. They wake up in the middle of the night. Now, if they were running on their body fat, they would not have to eat during the night because they have way more calories in their body fat than they could use in days of growing.
Yeah.
And
like they wouldn't be waking up and crying because they want to eat. Like it's
exactly.
kind of they
wake up and cry.
If we're talking with that logic, if we're using that logic with the ketone thing, they would just be fine, right? They wouldn't want to eat. Right. They'd eat like once or twice a day and just be fine and sleeping all the time.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even sleeping then, right? Because ketones give you energy and they're so good for you. No, seriously, right? Like,
well, now you're just goofing on them.
Well, hold on. No, but dude, they do
sleep a lot. They sleep during the day. They take naps.
Yeah.
But the problem is they don't sleep through the night. And also they need to be fed throughout the day. They need to be fed
all the time,
way more often than adults.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's something everybody knows.
They're like tiny little rich pianos, right? They're just eating all the fucking time.
This is not enough scoops, Mom. It's more scoops.
Man, I missed those videos. All right, I'm sorry, the detour.
So I just wanted to make the point that the infant starts to cry, whether it's awake or it wakes up, when its liver gets low on glycogen. That is the ticking timer of infant refeeding.
Yep.
It's not fat stores. Why? That doesn't make any sense. If they have all of this, but yes, they're fat. They're way fatter than other animals. And they use a decent amount of ketones because they have little tiny livers. So they have bigger head. And she also showed, which I didn't send you, but she had a head size thing, and obviously baby heads are way bigger compared to their bodies than adult heads to the adult bodies, right?
Right.
So your body grows a lot more than your head as you mature. So, my liver, your liver, is bigger in relation to our heads and brains than a baby liver to their brain.
Right.
And they're also growing. So basically they have a smaller, and the brain is one of the most metabolically active tissues. Mm-hmm. So they have a liver that, just like us, it stores glycogen, and they have body fat that stores fatty acids, and they start to run low on their liver glycogen really fast because their brain is using a ton of it because they're learning at like a super high level. Like they're learning way faster than anybody who's studying really hard as an adult. Like the amount of neurological shit that's going on in a baby is enormous, you know, picking up, you know, just basic concepts of like the physical world and how it works. It's a lot of neurological connections, a lot of energy.
Right.
And they're growing, which is something adults are not doing usually. Right. So, so what I would say is like all of these things that she's pointing out are just kind of like, yeah, human babies are fat. Humans are also like, you know, they used to be nomadic. There's a million reasons why, like, you don't want your baby to starve, right? So if there's this buffer of fatty acids that we have, because we do have a big brain. So that the brain development, it eats up your liver glycogen really fast. Whereas like a baby rat, their liver, you know, can go longer, you know, proportionally per body size than a human infant can. And so basically she's kind of trying to stuff all of these like factoids about humans into this thing where it's like, okay, so we're meant to eat fat. Like fat is our thing.
Because babies are fat, right? Yeah, and they have a lot of ketones. And
because adult humans are fat compared to other mammals. Like we're like the fattest mammals.
Yeah.
Body fat.
Yeah, it's starting to sound a little bit like the vegan argument, right? Where it's like, we're the only animal that eats other species' milk, right? It's just like...
Well, I would just say the fact that humans like used to be nomadic, and I think that's a lot more of a compelling like reason why you would have, you know, high body fat. And again, if babies physiologically preferred to run on fatty acids and ketones, then they wouldn't be so obstinate about bothering mom every X amount of hours when their liver glycogen gets low. Doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
They would be using.
And even when they're slowly getting out of that state, I mean, most healthy babies, this is how people judge the babies, right? It's like, oh, your baby's so healthy, it's eating all the time. I mean, that's just kind of I feel like, you know, like 50, 100 years ago, before we had any of the science, before people talked about it, just intuitively, people just kind of, that's what people would say, right? Intuitively, like, your baby's so healthy, it's eating all the time. And if your baby is not eating all the time, it's like, what's wrong with him? Is he sick? Is he not feeling good? Like, you know, without any science, you know, like, you know, you can judge for yourself if that's, you know, logical or not, but it is a thing kind of that we all, I feel like most normal people understand that.
Right. So her whole video kind of, and it gets into anthropology too, like how, she thinks that it's likely that humans first developed their large brain from cracking open bones, rather than like cooking, say, tubers or other high carbohydrate sources, or, you know, things like, or taking down large game, because you know, she had this, you know, there's an anthropological theory about, you know, that we created these like smashing tools to smash open bones, and then in the process of smashing open the bones, you create shards of things that eventually you'll go, oh, this is sharp, like, and create, you know, like spearheads and arrows and stuff that can take down large game. And now you're really off to the races.
I don't know, man. I think it's hard with all these theories that people. It's like with the you know, like with plants even, and like with ayahuasca and things like that, right? It's like, you know, how the fuck did people figure it out to put these two things together? Now, like a scientific person like would say like it was just accident, like, right? Now, and then you have that other side of like the spiritual new agey person would say what they say, which is like the plants told them to. And it's like, I don't know if I buy either of them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't think it was pure accident. I mean, I don't know. Of course I don't know, but I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on it? You think it was like pure accident, just people dying over and over again, you know what I mean? And just like, oh, don't eat this plant then, or, you know, while we were still evolving.
You know, I think the amount of trial and error that you can get, like, imagine, I don't know. It's hard to imagine like generations and generations of humans and like what they could learn in an environment. I mean, it'd probably be a lot. So, and people are curious. I mean, that's like a, you know, defining characteristic of the human brain. So I'm not too over surprised by people like learning, you know, herbal medicine and stuff in these tribal situations. And I'm not surprised that they like attributed, you know, sacred narratives to pass down this knowledge in an oral tradition. You know, it seems like that's like a good way to go about that kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, you know, I think that there's like with a thing like diet and, you know, oh, did humans, did they eat a lot of fruit? Like when, you know, when they were such and such, or it's like the thing with anthropology is, if you find, you know, like, like a French press or something like from 200,000 years ago, it's like, all right, they had a French press, but it's like, if you don't find one, that doesn't mean they didn't have one. You know what I mean? Like it's like an asymmetrical, and a lot of things like tools for like stones for smashing bones themselves. So animal bones are longer lasting in the anthropological record or the fossil record or whatever of sites than the leftovers of a tuberous meal, you know? And there's certain ways to cook things. Again, it's like, oh, well, you know, like clay or whatever would last for a while, but there's ways to cook things before you have those technologies that people could figure out, you know, using fire, using hot stones. Yeah. Just like literally throwing stones into a fire and then cooking things on those stones, or taking them out and putting them in like a tent area. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different ways. Like people fry eggs, like, you know, on tanks in World War II, like in North Africa and stuff. Like there's a lot of ways to cook things when you have to get creative. So anyway, I just wanted to like, I think that it's incorrect that humans are like meant to eat fat as their thing. And however, it's like, if there has to be a person for me to disagree with and say like, I'd much rather it be somebody like Amber, than somebody like Paul Saladino. Because
she also has like a, you know, I like how she talks about it. Like she says that, you know, it's not like, she doesn't seem like she's just doing it just to get shredded, right, or whatever. Which I feel like most of those guys, they when they look good, they just, you know, you look good, you feel good, and then it just like gets the ball rolling with whatever. You know, they could be eating shit, and if they look good, they'll just be advertising shit all over the place. But with Amber, it's like she says she has depression, right, and she had like severe anxiety, even schizophrenia at points. Am I right that I remember?
Yeah,
now,
she has.
Now, what do you think? What do you think that is like? I mean, I don't know the whole scope. Of course, it's a complicated thing, but like, you know, because you hear the same thing from like people like Michaela, right? Jordan Peterson's daughter, right? And even Jordan Peterson himself. Now, I think, and when they talk about it, they always talk about it like they did the carnivore diet, long, you know, for quite a bit of time, and then they'd have some carbs and they feel like shit. And hey, I haven't had schizophrenia, but like, let me tell you, when I was doing low carb and I ate some carbs, I felt like shit. Me personally, yeah. I had that like same thing. I had that like drop in blood sugar. I was just not, I wouldn't, you know, I don't know whether it's my body got adjusted or, you know, I think that's what happened. I think my body got adjusted to the certain way of eating to when I'm giving it this much of this, you know, fuel. It's like, I don't know, fucking, you know, just nitro just kills me. So I'm thinking like, could that be part of it, that they're, you know, they tried switching over and they would just get these symptoms back, and then maybe just they also need to adjust what type of carbs they're having, how much carbs, when they're having it, and all those sort of things?
Well, you know, for Amber, I don't know as much about her like forays into going off the diet and what happened, but I know for Jordan Peterson and his daughter, they ate plants, like they would eat, was it like kale or broccoli or things that like would kind of be the sort of plants that if you have a sensitive digestive system to, you know, plants with a lot of stuff in them.
Right. That's exactly what would irritate them.
Yeah, exactly. It would be like, you know, if somebody who has a lot of allergies and they're like, yeah, I was just eating on a carnivore diet, then I just had like a pound of peanuts.
I had a whole jar of peanut butter.
Yeah, not the
ruined me, man.
Not like this. It's not like, you know, white rice or something like it's just like a pure starch source that doesn't have a lot of like weird plant chemicals and anti-nutrients and shit like that. They kind of went for, you know, something that would be higher on the anti-nutrient load and stuff like that. But also, I don't want to speculate too heavily that their problem was from endotoxin, although I do think anybody who has autoimmune issues probably has hot endotoxemia. But I will say I would be super curious. Somebody either, Jordan, I mean, he's like, he almost died from like a, whatever. We don't have to.
Yeah. Well, but, and that's the other thing I was going to add to this cocktail, because, and like you said, I think they're coming from a good place, but it's just that also both of them were like on severe, like, medication, right? For those things, like serotonin drugs and antidepressants and all kinds of shit. So, I mean, could it be that maybe, when they're eating something that, right, like you said, is growing the endotoxin, it's just reacting with all those things that are still in their gut. I know you hate that word. No offense, bro.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I'd like to see somebody like that who has those awful symptoms, if they have any carbohydrate. I would just love to see their blood before and after that meal and look at the difference in endotoxin.
That'd be an interesting thing to do then.
Yes.
Okay. And you can test for that, right? We've talked about this before. You can just take a blood test for endotoxin, you're saying.
Correct. Yeah, there's actually a lot of studies about post-meal endotoxemia. And when I was looking into this, it looked like any time it was tested, any population, so, they'll have a healthy control group and some type of disease group, like a heart disease. Usually it was heart disease or metabolic syndrome, like type 2 diabetes. And the disease group of those two diseases and all the kind of related, the kind of modern non-communicable diseases, those people always had higher postprandial endotoxemia than the healthy control group. Like just every study I've ever seen. So, until otherwise, I really just assume that if somebody has a problem, specifically because carbohydrates are more easily fermentable in the small intestine by bacteria. Right. If you have a really permeable gut in the small intestine, right, and you have a population of bacteria that are producing a lot of this endotoxin, and they just get like juiced up from carbohydrates, maybe you have slow absorption, they have all these medical problems. So it would make sense. Like they have slow peristalsis, they have low stomach acid, low. Yeah. And I think they're picking up on that a little bit intuitively,
because that's what I'm saying. A lot of people that do have problems with autoimmune issues, whether it be whatever, Crohn's or vitiligo, they'll go to one of those practitioners. They'll usually do the standard medical treatment, which is nothing, and then they'll go to like a alternative practitioner, and they'll tell them like to go on a elimination diet. You've heard that, right? Like, that's super common, and usually it always helps. And I think they're probably taking out. Well, first they're usually taking out, all the cooked bullshit, whatever, breads and PUFA stuff and all that. And then, then they wind up just being on greens and meats, right? And then I think people like Michaela and maybe Amber, maybe they just take that stuff out and they're just left with meat, to where they're probably having no reaction at all. And they're probably just kind of noticing that. But it's interesting, man. Yeah, that would be a cool thing to do, because the autoimmune issues are really like so all over the place. So many people are having those sort of things. And yeah, the typical mainstream way, well, the alternative health mainstream way to deal with it is to go like a elimination diet, low carb diet. And that's what I think it makes a lot of sense, man. I think we're kind of like connecting the dots there.
Yeah. The only problem I have with that is that those people then go on to say, therefore normal people. Right. I mean, actually, Jordan Peterson has to his credit. I don't actually like the guy, but I will say that to his credit, he has always gone out of his way every time I've heard him talk about this to just say, I am not recommending this diet to other people.
Yeah, and it works for me.
I am telling you what happened to me.
Right.
And I respect that, at least. So, but a lot of other people, will just say, I had problem X. And I went on this total elimination diet, and I realized that my best symptom reductions was, whatever extreme diet, like just eating beef or whatever, beef and water, So everybody should do that, or
Mm-hmm.
some variation of just recommending it to normal people.
Yeah, man. Now, if people are not that at that extreme level yet, and they're also maybe coming back from like a low carb or a carnivore diet, and they want to start adding more carbs and to check it out to see how they feel, see how it works for them. I mean, what kind of carbs would you recommend them adding? What do you think would be like a a thoughtful kind of thing to eat?
Well, I would tailor it to, first of all, what they crave or want.
Mm-hmm.
So like if it's somebody who like had to cut sugar out of their coffee, or just like doesn't drink coffee anymore, and it just kills them, and they just always loved having coffee with sugar and cream or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
add that back in and see how it feels like.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna have the added benefit of you being happy about it, which
Mm-hmm.
is healthy. It's not like, like if you hate sweet potatoes and I go, all right, first thing to add back into your diet for carbs, 50 grams of sweet potatoes.
Bro, but sweet potatoes is the best potato.
So I would just say add what you want.
So whatever
Now,
feels good. Okay.
I mean, to a certain extent, like if you were on a junk food diet
Mm-hmm.
and then you started moving towards a carnivore diet, you might not have a reasonable baseline for what to add. But like, like have some rice. Like say somebody goes out and they used to get sushi.
Mm-hmm.
And now they can. This happened to me when I was carnivore. I could only get sashimi. I could only get like the fish, and they bring out the fish with the rice, and you just eat the fish like at
Right.
a Japanese place. And then they'd have like a salad, and you eat that because like the lettuce and stuff doesn't really have any actual carbs in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that satisfying. So it's like, okay, if you used to eat sushi and then you cut the rice, add that back. Try sushi and see how that feels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like just kind of try to do something that's like normal and going back to your thing. Like now, if you went on an elimination diet,
Yeah.
and you got symptom reduction from cutting out like breads or whatever, don't add those back right away. Like add something, like generally speaking, potatoes, rice, things that are starches that don't have a lot of other stuff in them.
Mm-hmm. And by other stuff, you
would
mean
be
like a lot of the other anti-nutrients, I guess. Yeah, is that like a good general word to use or no?
Yeah, and plant compounds, and like the weird proteins in wheat products that some people are sensitive to.
Right, like gluten and gliadin and all those sort of things, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, something like, I wouldn't tell somebody to eat like raw broccoli, because that's like hard to digest.
Yeah. Well, fuck. If you like, okay, I'm not gonna say. I was gonna say if you like raw broccoli, you're an asshole. But God, I mean, I just, in Russia, I've never seen broccoli until I moved here. We don't have that plant, and they have it now. You know what they call it in Russia? Broccoli, because we don't have a word for it. So it's like the same thing. You know what I mean? Like we have like cucumbers, like a different word, but yeah. So. Okay, so some simple starches like potatoes and rice would probably be good, and I guess or just sugars. You mean like fruits and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, fruits, or like I was saying, if you like sugar in your coffee,
Mm-hmm.
like I wouldn't say. I mean, what you shouldn't do is just be like, all right, I'm gonna just take 10 sugar packets and just like eat them,
dump them in there. Yeah,
that's probably not good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Think of it like you. I don't know. Think of it like as a person who's like quitting like alcohol or something. It's like, not that it's necessarily the same thing, but like there's a lot of things where it's like, drastic changes. People have to go to like detoxification wards sometimes if they're drinking a certain amount and they just stop.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like that. I mean, these are like, alcohol is a macronutrient, and it trains your body to to a certain metabolism, and when you take that away, you get really fucked up. And it's not drunk anymore that's the problem. It's alcohol.
That's an interesting
metabolic.
Yeah, that's a good thing to remember,
addiction.
kind of. So just try out so fruits, potatoes, white rices, probably not brown rices, right? Because it has all that other stuff in there. So just easily.
If you have a sensitive system,
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
if you could just eat whatever before and you just go on a low carb diet for a little while, you could probably just go back. But if you were somebody who was having symptoms and you started to eliminate stuff, yeah, I mean, don't add like the weird stuff back. Add like the most basic carbohydrate foods and just see how it goes.
Yeah, feel it out. I like that, man. Feel it out. Well, my brother, thanks for your time. It was good. We had a good chat. Anything else you want to talk about? One more thing to bring up?
Covered the lipivore stuff. I mean, I think it's like, it's funny because it's I'm glad that somebody's at least doing something interesting in the space.
Yeah.
Because basically it's like, again, I mean, it might get boring to the audience because they're not as familiar with this stuff, but like the kind of things that some of these people talk about when they go on the Joe Rogan podcast, like for a mass consumption audience, like you just have to realize like how much crap that is. Like it's just,
it takes
not
time.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's not interesting.
It's not cutting edge. Like if somebody's on Joe now, 10 years ago or maybe more, but early YouTube, if somebody was on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about some scientific thing or nutritional thing, that might have been cutting edge.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that time. At this time on the internet, if somebody is on, because Joe Rogan is basically a mainstream platform now.
Sure.
If somebody's on a mainstream platform and they're talking about a new diet or they're bringing forth something that they're presenting as cutting edge, it's not cutting edge. You're just late to the party, and you're getting like a refined marketed pitch for an idea that is becoming a fad.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, you know, people want to hear, like you said, it's the extremes. It's just people want to hear something cool and different, and they're gonna fall for it, like we talked about earlier many times. And yeah, man. So be careful out there.
In the streets.
In the streets. Watch out. You know, you gotta stay a 5%er and you're gonna be all right. Keep it real. All right, brother. Thanks for coming on. I'll chat with you next time.
All right.
Don't forget to check out Kyle's YouTube channel, and if you want to see that video about why low carbers hate that video, his YouTube handle is Nutricrinology. So check that out. It'll be linked in the show notes and all that.
Things you own end up owning you.